Great. Excellent. A beautiful Sunday. We're here with Mathieu Bitton. Mathieu, cinematography, photography, overall documentarian, historian. I was trying to relay to Nate exactly who you were. How would you describe yourself?
How do I describe myself? That's a great question. Well, I guess I'm like the guy that should have been uh, an adult in the 70s and should have been black and should have been, you somehow in entertainment. But I'm basically, the best way to describe myself is I'm like passion overload. Like I've always been so passionate about so many specific things. And I was kind of to the point of being obsessive, so I'm like sort of passionate, obsessive, nerd, like with, all these things I love and collect. And so I'm a collector. I know in this little Leica camera movie that we made last year, they called me like a historian, like you just said. But as far as that, I'm more documenting the history that's being created. So I know it's strange. Like I don't consider myself a historian, but I consider myself like a maybe documentarian, whether it's with photography, video, graphics, or, the different things I do. Even my collecting in a way is like people joke about my place being like the world's smallest African American history museum. It's like I'm constantly kind of amassing a bit of history. And
The Mathieu Bitton collection. I mean, I follow you on Instagram. It's so entertaining, and just all the stuff you put up is, just the boxes you have of every item ever of your.
It's a little crazy, and I'm in the middle of packing right now to move for the first time in a really long time. So I'm finding all these incredible things that some of them I just forgot I had, and it's just kind of a fun process. And one of the things I have to do is like actually create an archive of everything I have, which I've never been good at because I'm always too busy to do that. So, might be something I hired Julian, who's behind here, my son, to help with that. But it's kind of a crazy thing. And I have things that are literally like yesterday, I pulled out the original painting. It's like this gouache painting and collage for the Black Caesar movie poster, like the original art for Black Caesar, this huge Fred Williamson Blaxploitation film. It's like sitting in my closet for all these years in a box because I don't even have room to have it up on the wall. I may change that in the next place, but it's like crazy. It's like that should be in a museum, but here it is in my possession for the past 20 years or whatever. It's just kind of crazy. And then I'm like looking through a box, and here's the original acetate for Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" with the alternate mix, and the titles are still the old title. Just like things that should all be in museums, and maybe eventually, or most likely eventually will be, but it's just this thing about a lot of it is, I believe, is destiny. Like I really believe in fate.
Sure.
But fate, not so much like, the dogma and all this stuff, but mostly the fate of like passion. Like if you're passionate about something and you're genuine, then your fate will be that these things will come into your possession. Like, your passion will follow you. And the best example I can have of that is, so I've worked on most of the Marvin Gaye legacy releases for the past 20 years, as a graphic designer. And I did I think it was 2001. Yeah, it was the deluxe edition. Would have been the 30th anniversary at the time of What's Going On.
Mm-hmm.
And like one day, so I'm designing all these things, and my friend Vartan, who works at Universal, used to be at MCA's, hires me to do these things. And I'm driving around West Hollywood after a trip once, and there's garage sales, right? And I'm a collector of things, but I don't really do garage sales because usually it's just crap.
Yeah.
And I'm like driving, I remember on Willoughby in West Hollywood, right around here. I'm driving and I see a sign like garage sale, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, something in me was like, stop at this garage sale. And the other side of me is like, don't stop at a fucking garage sale. What are you going to do with a garage sale? Buy some like tennis rackets or something. So
For $2.
But I keep driving, and then I'm like on Melrose, and there's this voice in my head that's like, you moron, go back to this garage sale. I'm like, okay, now I'm officially crazy. I've got voices in my head. go back to the garage sale. The guy's got a box of records, you know, like just vinyl. And I start flipping through the records, and I'm like, wow, it's some really good Motown stuff, like mono versions of Stevie Wonder's "I Was Made to Love Her," "Miracles." Like all kinds of really good Motown stuff. So I'm like, how much for this box? Like, I just want to take the whole box. It's all good Motown stuff. They still have shrink wrap on them and all this stuff.
Wow.
And the woman's like, it's like $1 each or something like that. I'm like, oh, it was a woman. Yeah. I'm like, listen, lady, like, you can't be charging $1 each for these records. Like, these are rare records, you know? She's like, well, you know, my dad used to work in the industry, whatever. He passed away. I'm just getting rid of all this stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll take the box. I'm flipping through the box, and there's this acetate from Hitsville Studios. It's got the label, you know, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, and like Flying High in the Friendly Sky. It's called The Friendly Sky, and then he's got this track Live and Let Live. I'm like, this is not right. So I was like, how much for this? You know, she's like $5 or something. I was like, no, we'll give you a couple $100. That's all I have on me. But like, and she was like, are you crazy? Like, I'm saying $1 each. I'm like, take the couple $100. Like, this is nothing for what this is. And I even said, are you sure? Like, cause I felt guilty. I'm like, are you sure? You know? And then, you know, flash forward to now we're working on the 40th anniversary in 2011. Now I have the original acetate. It's in my collection. And we use it for the deluxe edition. You know, my friend Harry Weinger, who supervises all of the Motown stuff, you know, you take a listen to it. It's an alternate mix. It's all scratched up, but they managed to, like, you know, recover some stuff. We use the art in the booklet. So it's, to me, that's an example of, like, my passion following me around. Like, why me? Why out of the, you know, 7 billion something people on earth, I'm the guy driving by that garage sale and find that record, you know? So stuff like that's happened a lot. And a lot of these things that I've ended up in my possession, I've ended up through some weird twist of fate, you know?
It's amazing, because I say this to people all the time, that 90% of life is just showing up, and the karma and things I've been involved in have just been stories like that, where I've wanted to blow something off, or, you know, and then I do it or go through it, and the most amazing results happen, or something like that happens, where it's like, what are the chances of that even?
Yeah. That's attributed to Woody Allen, by the way, that quote about 90%.
Life showing up.
Even though he says he never said it, but it's attributed to him.
Shout out to Woody Allen.
It definitely, the showing up thing, like, you know, a lot of the most successful people you hear about will tell you, like, always say yes, you know? That's become problematic for me, because there's enough of, like, people asking me, like, hey, will you shoot this? Will you do that?
Favorite friend.
Yeah, and it's always, somehow the favors always end up being the nightmares. Like, I don't, yeah, that's just been a constant in my career, where I'm like, okay, I'll help you do this, and then the people become like a real nightmare, or they just are completely unreasonable, or, you know, I'll do something and they'll, like, sell the picture for something promoting themselves and make money, but then they're like, no, but you did it for free. So, you know, so I go by instinct on that as well. And I think probably that's the greatest tool we're given as human beings, is instinct. Because usually,
That's
you
correct.
know, unless you're a crackhead and your instinct is to do more crack, I think instinct is very strong and very good.
Sure. And that's not just in Hollywood. I grew up in Chicago, and Nate's the engineer here at Sunset Sound. I mean, how many people just know that you work here and they want to come in and record for a discount, or
Yeah, and I experienced the same sort of thing, that the favors are the problems, and people that really consider what you do and give you a little consideration, even if it's at a discount, end up being the more pleasant projects always.
Yeah. And my favorite one, and it's very common, is, you know, on the photography side, and especially on the fine art photography side of my work, my exhibitions, is people always saying, like, oh, you should give me, like, a print. I'll put it in my office, because, you know, like, Steven Spielberg comes into my office, and then maybe he'll see it and he'll want to buy. And then this one, and, you know, I'm working on this TV show, and so if I have a bunch of your photos, people will ask. And I was like, or you could just buy them. I'll give you a discount, you know, and put them up in the office. And when people say, hey, and you say, yeah, this is part of my collection, not something you freeloaded off of me, to have what you want for free. And that you know, that really does happen a lot, and it makes me laugh. You know, like, some people just it's always the richest people.
Yep.
100% always the richest people who ask for stuff for free, which is, I guess
Entitlement.
they're used to it because they always get shit for free, but.
Well, then the story will be when it's hanging in their office that you gave that to them and insisted that they hang it. Oh, Matthew
Yeah.
Bitton wanted me to do
Yeah,
that.
he was my best friend, and he gave me this. And,
I'm sure
yeah,
these Hollywood stories get crazier and crazier.
it gets to me sometimes, but I try to
Well,
stay focused on the goals.
Dave Chappelle is very lucky that you did him a favor.
I don't know. In this,
I want to get back to Dave and all this amazing work. I've came up with the line for this: the cross-pollination superstorm of capturing greatness. For
well, I like that.
Matthew here. I've been waiting to use that line, and there it is. Actually, I was watching The Black Godfather the other night on Netflix, Clarence Avant,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about you because it's just like, what do you do? Everything. How do you put a hat on something? And it's just
That's my nickname, by the way, the Black Godfather.
Is it?
Yeah, they stole that from me.
I like that shirt
No,
you
I'm
wear
joking.
with Dave with Chappelle. It says, "My name's Matthew. I'm white." And what's the last?
Oh
word?
yeah, well that's a great story because okay, well,
Please.
Dave Chappelle. First of all, let's just call it like it is like the greatest guy on the planet. He's like the kindest, most generous. Everything about that guy is genuine. As we know, he walked away from $50 million, took a 13-year break from entertainment, got down to nothing, and came back with the strongest comeback of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And all staying genuine, staying with his passion, staying with his truth. Like, this guy is truth. Like, he'll walk away from anything at any moment if they don't basically go with what he feels instinctively is what his art should be. And I don't know if you want to go through how we met and all this stuff.
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of a funny story. So first of all, back in the mid 2000s, there were two things that I would actually cancel, like going to a wedding or cancel going to a dinner party. Two shows. It was Chappelle's show and Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's like the two shows that you had to leave me alone. I gotta watch these episodes. This is before streaming and before I think TiVo and all that stuff. So I had to be in front of the TV to watch this thing. So flash forward to I think it was 2008. My friend Ruth, I was talking about earlier, Ruth Arzadeh, who used to be Prince's assistant, became Prince's manager. She and I became friends. We met at through a mutual friend, Melody Asani, who just married Flea a couple weeks ago. She's a great designer.
Yeah.
And so I had met Melody at a Prince party, one of his famous 3121 parties, and Melody introduced Ruth and I, and then we became friends. And, so she would have me, she would invite me to these parties and things. And one night I was at dinner with a friend in New York City. And I got a text on my BlackBerry, I remember, from Ruth. And she's like, get over to the Gansevoort. P is going to do a show on the rooftop. It's going to be crazy.
Oh, wow.
And I literally remember but she's like, come alone. It was always come alone,
Of course.
And because it was all the Prince stuff was always so exclusive. It's like just the fact that even I could go was insane, And I always pinched myself, sitting in his living room over here, watching him and Stevie Wonder jam in the living room. It's just okay, as being the biggest Prince fan in the world, as we're here in Studio 3 at Sunset Sound, and I still have chills since we walked in. But so I tell my friend as an emergency, I made up some kind of story. Luckily, at the time, there was no Instagram or anything, so he couldn't see that. I would be posting something from flaking on the dinner before the meal even got there. I got an emergency. I got to go. I'm sorry. I'll explain another time, So now they'll know the truth from this podcast. I actually ran to a Prince show, and I'm running through the lobby of the Gansevoort. My name was actually on the list, which sometimes she would say, come over, and there would be some confusion. And I run to the elevator, and there's Dave Chappelle in the elevator. And I'm like, holy shit. Here I am about to go see Prince on a rooftop. But now I'm completely starstruck. And I don't get starstruck really that much. I used to when I was younger. But now I'm kind of I've seen everything. And, there's only a few people who give me that kind of reaction.
And you hadn't met him before? And
No, never met him.
Ran into him at a party.
I was just the huge fan of the show. I thought he was the funniest guy on the planet. Shook his hand, said hello, whatever. We get rushed to the rooftop. Prince starts jamming. That's the first night. Another mutual friend, Fred Yonet, who's a harmonica player, Frederick Yonet.
Yeah, he did the line for, or the little riff for the Chappelle show, didn't he?
No, actually, no. I don't think he came in later.
Okay.
That's a different guy. I don't know who that is actually, but no, Fred came with Dave and like played with Prince for the first time that night on that rooftop. They did "Miss You" by the Rolling Stones, and Dave got up and played tambourine, and one of the Prince cymbal tambourines. And so I'm just like kind of witnessing this thing. My mind is blown, the whole thing. And then flash forward to 2011. I'm
Is this a no photography event?
always no photography, yeah. And I wish, like, unless you were my friend Afshin Shahidi, who was Prince's photographer at the time, so he got all the photos. He put out a book last year, actually, and you see a bunch of the party photos in there as well. So, and that's the amazing thing is through the Prince world, I made some of my best, closest friends, people that will be friends till the day I die, like, or they die. But, I made a lot of good friends through that crew, which is amazing. And so 2011, show up at another Prince party. And this guy, Fred Yone, comes up to me and he's like, I guess we had seen each other previously at the backstage at the Grammys that night. So this was the night of the Grammys, 2011. And comes up to me and he's like, aren't you French? And I'm like, yeah, so we start speaking French and he's like, oh, I'm here with Dave. So we go and like, greet Dave. I came with Lenny Kravitz and we were like, it was obvious that the party had not started. And we're like, Janelle Monáe was supposed to jam with Prince and Misty Copeland was there. And so it was like, but it was obvious that we came too early. So we all start like shooting pool and stuff. And, I end up talking to Dave. This time, like a real conversation. The previous time was just a handshake. And, it became like a legendary late night, And so I guess Dave remembers that as the first time we met. He doesn't remember the elevator thing, or vaguely remembers, but he definitely remembers that. And he has this story about how he thought I was a gangster and I was like a French gangster. At the time I had long hair, slick back, ponytail, And so, yeah, he always says that, which cracks me up. But again, flash forward to 2015, I guess. 14, maybe 15. 15, I think. Same friend, Ruth. I owe her a lot. She's just been like a guardian angel, and we're there for each other. She's amazing. I guess basically put me back in the mix, and she was talking to Fred's wife, Carla Sims, who's Dave's publicist, and was like, you should have Matthew shoot some stuff for Dave, and so long story short.
That's how it happened. Off, but was 2015? Is this when he's prepping for the 3 specials for Netflix?
He filmed one in Austin that year, and then March 2016, he filmed the one at the Palladium. So that's my first official gig. I'd shot some shows in 2015 and early 16.
Just at comedy clubs around the country, or
just around LA, like in New York, I think once, and then. So once they were about to shoot that special at the Palladium, it was 3 nights, 6 shows. They brought me in to shoot the stills, so that was my first official gig. And Dave and I we hit it off instantly, and we were like very similar. Our musical taste, film, we're into a lot of the same stuff. We can make each other laugh, which was a plus, And I've got a very inappropriate sense of humor, completely not politically correct. So it was like, okay, we're definitely meant to be hanging out and saying just really wrong things all the time and make each other laugh. And so then the thing I think sadly that bonded us the most was about a month and a half later, Prince passes. And that was like, I got a call that he's going to do a tribute show at the No Name bar on Fairfax. It's gone now. What was it, the No Name or something No Name? Yeah. And it was just kind of a surreal. We were all in shock. It was just completely couldn't even deal with reality because he was our hero. We knew him. It was like, we weren't ready for that. But somehow,
where were you at when you heard the news?
I was in bed actually in the morning, and I get a text from Afshin, my friend, the photographer, and a text from Ruth, and they're like, something's going on, something's weird. This hadn't been announced yet. Something's weird. There's a body at Paisley Park, but they knew that there weren't a lot of people living there. There was just Prince, and that maybe it was somebody from the staff. Like, so and we all had this horrendous feeling like, yeah, this is, even though they're not saying what it is, it felt like the energy had changed on the globe. Like there was something off, And then I got a call from a woman at CNN who I had worked with previously, and I think what happened is like she saw me talking to him at one of these parties or something, and she was like, "Oh, you're like a Prince guy, an expert and stuff. Can you come on CNN and talk about it?" And like honestly, normally I wouldn't even have done that. I was in such shock that I was like, maybe talking about him will help this, surreal feeling. And so I went on CNN and talked about him and, his legacy and all this stuff. And I did a couple different shows, and then it started to feel real, And I remember like, as I'm sitting in the interview, I'm like, they're like, "Oh, they found him in the elevator." And I'm like, okay, this is too much. Like, with the "Let's Go Crazy," the lyrics about the elevator bring you down. I was like, this is too creepy. But that's, the point at which like I feel like that Dave and I got into this very heavy Prince energy, and
I didn't know that about Dave. He's just a huge Prince fan enthusiast.
yeah. I mean, it's like Dave, Chris Rock, like they were all good friends too, So
it was so shocking, also just the way he passed, because no one, he didn't have any documented, use of drugs or anybody. Usually, somebody if they have an alcohol problem or, I guess with the greatest artist ever.
And he was like the healthiest guy you knew. That's what was funny. Like he would like, fine like or kick musicians out for like smoking cigarettes and doing drugs, and
but he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, and I guess part of the issue here, which I can't judge, but frustrates me sometimes, is there's a whole religious belief, being a Jehovah's Witness, that you're not allowed to have blood transfusion, so he couldn't do the proper surgery, and therefore started using pain pills. But I really do believe that he didn't know, whoever got these pills that killed him, I don't think he really knew what was in them, So, well, I guess we'll never really know the truth, but it's a very sad day for sure.
Yeah, I've had knee surgeries and been giving Norcos, and luckily they make me sick, but I could see how, if you have just continuous pain, it's like, what options do you have? And I've talked to people about this. It's like, physical therapy doesn't work. It's just you sit there in agonizing pain, or you're kind of buzzed up. And I guess I don't really know what my thoughts are on that, because not with Prince, but with anybody, because you want to have a quality of life that's worth living. And I mean, these people are in agonizing pain.
Yeah. I mean, that's I blame that industry for it more than him or the people taking it. It's the availability. Creating something like fentanyl, it's just like, why the hell would you need something that's 100 times stronger than heroin for pain? I know they developed it for cancer patients and stuff, but then keep it there. But we lost Tom Petty, we lost Mac Miller, we lost what's the singer from the Cranberries? Like all these people to fentanyl, and 30,000 people a year. Like, okay, these are celebrities, but you're also losing 30,000 people a year to opioids. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, real quick, just a point on that. Jeff Tweedy of Wilco.
One of my favorite people, by the way.
I love him.
Huge
too.
fan.
That whole band and group and music.
Sky Blue Sky is one of my top 10 favorite albums ever.
Have you been to the Loft in Chicago where they record?
No. I've seen like in the Mavis Staples documentary and stuff, but I haven't.
But he said he's very open about his addictions, and said that this is so overprescribed. Is America in more pain than they were 15 years ago? We've always had this, but it's just now they're just so overprescribed.
I would think so, especially when you look at America today.
Back to Dave Chappelle. Does he, when you guys go on, I saw you at the Comedy Store on Friday night shooting with him. Does he just text you and say, "Hey, let's go do some shows"? Or does he have a schedule when he's working?
No, that kind of stuff isn't really on the schedule, but sometimes he'll text me. Sometimes, his tour manager will text me. It's either one of the two.
But when he's working
or I'll hear he's in town and be like, "Hey, you're here." He's like, "Oh yeah, come to the store." So it's kind of, there's definitely no schedule unless it's like a tour.
Not to backtrack, but I want to give everyone an overview of who you are. 1973, you're born in France.
Yeah, Paris.
And then what year do you move to Los Angeles? 14
Okay,
years old?
so I moved in September '87, so I guess 32 years ago.
And what was the reasoning that your mother moved here?
My mom had been, she's a fashion designer. She had moved here in '82. So for 5 years, I was living with my dad and in boarding school, and a pretty bohemian kind of lifestyle because he was like out a lot, socializing, doing his thing. And I don't think his existence on earth was really to like raise children, but he's like the coolest guy. We were like more like friends than father and son. But so I had it's again, everything is fate. Everything happens for a reason. That's the time that I was able to like, basically nobody was checking on me. My mom had moved to LA, so she would call and check and, make sure everything was okay. But in general, if I wanted to be gone if I wanted to take the train to Amsterdam to see Prince, or to Dortmund, Germany, to see some shows, or to go to a record fair in London, really nobody knew where I was. And, like we didn't have cell phones, right? So, I would like call from a hotel in London and leave a message for my dad, like, hey, I'm in London for the record fair, but I'll be back in 2 days. Yeah, I was like literally like 11. I used to just take the train. I started working in clothing stores when I was 11, and in clothing factories, so that I could have money to go to concerts and buy records. And again, we were talking earlier, it's like there is a foundation to the work ethic. It's not just like all of a sudden, ooh, I met all these people and started working for them. I started working at a crazy age, and I worked every weekend, vacation, holidays. And my dad had a clothing store, and then his best friend had a whole chain of these stores. So I would either work in the stores or go work in the factories, which was like crazy because I was so young. I always looked a little older than I was, and I was a little bigger than your normal 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. But, the best feeling in the world was like in '86, so I was 13, just turned 13. Prince was coming to town, and it was the parade tour at the Zenith in Paris, and it was like, oh my God, I've got like, I don't even need to ask my parents for money to buy the tickets. Like, I remember that feeling of going at 13, using my own money to buy those concert tickets. The concert literally changed my life. That's the first time I saw him perform, and I was like, oh my God, I just witnessed like literally the greatest artist, that ever lived. That's how I feel to this day, And so that's part of the story, is like working from such a young age, and a lot of the work was, I was too young to be doing it. Like today, I guess you'd call that child labor, but my dad's friends were like, hey, you want to make money? I'll give you a job. And when I was like 14, I think 13 or 14, this guy, Richard Lyane, he's a really funny guy, but he owned all these stores, was like, it's time for you to graduate, to like the next level. I want you to fire the store manager. And I think I was 13. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, she's been stealing from the register, so I need you to tell her she's a thief and she's fired. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm too young to tell this poor like 60-year-old woman to, and I had to do it. And I remember crying like a little baby, like walking away because she started insulting me. And who the hell do you think you are? And screaming and throwing stuff around. And here I had to be like the guy to fire the woman who had been there for 20 years, But all these experiences, it's like I get when I look back at this guy, this friend of my dad's, he used to torture me. He used to do all these things that were just like borderline abusive. And then when I look back now on my work ethic, I'm like, oh, that's where that comes from, from like a funny story. One time working in this factory outside of Paris, he brought me to this huge room, and there's a box, like, I don't know, 8-foot tall, 9-foot tall box. And inside are like millions of labels, because there's clothing. He had clothing companies and labels. And so these are like the insewn labels, and there's probably like 2 million of them, literally. And he says, so these are my 9 brands. I want you to separate them by brand. And, put there was like one called Bruce Field, there's another one called Shistera. Like, here are these empty boxes, and I want you to take these millions of labels over the next week and put them all in boxes. And I'm like, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I was like 12 or 13. So I do it, and then at some point, another guy say, hey, can you come help us, like, shred these papers or something? So I leave the room, And I go shred these papers, and there was a loudspeaker system, and the guy comes over the loudspeaker system. He's like, Mathieu Bitton, when you take a shower in the morning, does your mother fold your towel and blah blah blah? He starts like shaming me in the fact because I had left all this stuff on the floor. So I was like, well, they called me away, and he's like, stop making excuses. I mean, this guy was nuts. And then like he says, you don't leave it. Tell them next time. No, I can't because I'm doing this job. And I can't stop in the middle of this job to go help you guys with another job. He's like, you got to stand up for yourself, and you got to. So he was teaching me all these life lessons. At the end of the week, I finished the job, and he said, "Okay, you can now throw all the labels back into the box. That was actually trash." And I'm like, I don't know what lesson you just try to teach me, motherfucker, but I hate you, and I hated him for a long time. But now I kind of get. He was teaching me some kind of sick Chinese kind of discipline.
That's how I grew up as well, though, with, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and I was by myself. And my first concert, not similar to Prince in Paris, but was Don Henley. And I
Nice.
Went there by myself. And my dad was a huge blues enthusiast, buddy guy, and introduced me to all these great drummers because he was a drummer. And I went to Don Henley, and I just knew that this was something I had to find my way in because I had snuck backstage. And I was with some other group because they were going into groups to meet Don after the show. And I was just, like you, blown away that I'd never been to a concert before. And I was just, the lights, the music, his voice. I was just, so enamored by the whole thing that I just wanted to, and being back there, I was adventurous because I think like you, we grew up without someone always being on our shoulders, watching everything we're doing. So we're kind of just navigating on our own, trial and error. We want to get into things because we're young. And, that's why I knew that after high school I was out of Midwest and I wanted to do something great with my life and just be exposed to more. But back to moving to L.A. You're 14 years old.
So I was 14, almost 15. I guess now I was like 14 and a half. My mom had moved here in 82. She worked for a company called Jag. That was like a big sportswear company. So also both my parents were or are fashion designers. And I basically I really had this dream of like coming to the US and working in the music industry and, doing something with all this passion. And I always knew that it wouldn't happen for me in Paris because there's something really petty about France. Like I love my country, but they're like, people are very negative and like petty. And even when I go back today, they'll still find shit to say like, oh, you work with this guy, he hasn't sold records and da da da. You work with that guy, there's always something. So I kind of felt like, the cliche of the land of opportunity and the American dream and all this stuff somehow was more feasible in America. And, and my mom was ready for my sister and I to come move here. My sister didn't last long. She went right back to France, but I stayed.
Had you discovered cameras at this point? I know your first camera, was that an M3 or was that your first Leica?
No, that was, so my godfather in France, who's another one of my dad's best friend, another big fashion guy, gave me, it was actually a Leica Flex, like a silver Leica Flex. And the funny thing is he gave me that when I was a teenager and I thought it never worked. It turned out like we sent it in to Leica, I remember, and it didn't work. And then one day I gave it back to him and he took the battery out and replaced the battery and the camera was working. And like literally, like I was like,
I did that last
whoever
week.
we sent, or he sent it to a camera repair shop. Maybe it wasn't Leica because they would have known that. But, it's just like this funny thing. So that was like my old camera. And then the M3 I didn't get till later. But then like for a while I was, photography was a hobby. Like photography was not my main thing because as soon as when I lived in New York, my whole crew, the people I was hanging out with were photographers and supermodels and modeling agents. Like I fell into that world.
And this is late 80s then?
This is like, this would be 92. I moved to New York in 92.
To go to school?
To go to NYU, yeah.
And were you going to Tisch school?
I was going to arts and sciences.
Okay.
Yeah, I was studying journalism actually. And so I started hanging out with all these people and even my roommate was a fashion photographer. And what happened is that I love photography, but I was very insecure and just felt like I'll never be as good as all these people I know. So I never made it a priority. But I knew in graphic design I had something to offer, and I started designing album covers. And I used to design a bunch of fake album covers of like artists I wanted to work on later in life. Yeah. That's how I got my first job in New York. I had a portfolio that was all fake stuff. and here I'm, what, like 19, 20 years old, however I was 20 maybe, and coming to this job, and the guy's like, wait, you've done album covers for James Brown and Marvin Gaye and Prince and this one and that one, and what's going on here? I was like, well, I didn't have anything real to show you, but this is what I can do. And the guy was like, holy shit, that takes a lot of balls. Like, this is a pretty good job, and we would never hire anyone who doesn't have the experience. But the fact that you came in and had the balls to show an entire fake portfolio, it shows that you're going to make it. And the guy hired me for the job. It was just like, well, if you can do this it was actually a fashion thing. But he was like, hey, if you can do this level of work on our stuff, yeah, why not? And I also learned a lesson of like, fake it till you make it, which I've had to use that a few times in life. But again, it goes back to being true to yourself. Like, I could have told the guy, no, these are real, but and make up some kind of story. But you don't want to be a liar. But at least you get through the door. That's the big thing I always tell people when they're like, well, how do you blah blah blah? I'm like, just figure out a way. Like, if you're smart, like, you got to be a little street smart in this business. Get through the door. Like, I didn't have, like I said, I didn't come from a family that was in this world that I wanted to be in. I thought initially that I should be in the fashion business because that's where my parents were. I learned pretty quickly that I didn't have a passion for it. I did really well. Like, I was a senior designer at American Eagle Outfitters. I did all the packaging and t-shirt graphics and all this stuff. I was there for a couple of years in New York, and I had my first like real salary and all this stuff. And I traveled to Asia all the time and first class. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. I was 20 something right out of NYU. But pretty soon I was like, man, I don't want to be living just for a salary or just living for comfort and knowing that that I have like, oh, I'm going to be in this company in 20 years. No, that's not what I want to do. So, at some point, an opportunity came up that meant lose my entire salary and go for a project that was going to take 6 months or something, maybe more. But I would only get like $7,000 for like the entire project. So I went from, whatever I was making at the time, like $90,000 a year, which was a lot, like in the 90s, to, still a lot. But I was like, okay, I'm now dropping everything. And
what was the project?
It was a book. There's a book called What It Is, What It Was, and Quentin Tarantino put out with Hyperion and Disney, basically. And so it was a book on blaxploitation film posters. And funny as my dad must be feeling, I was talking about him, he's FaceTiming me, which doesn't happen too much. That's funny. So I had this idea that I was going to do. I had this poster collection, and I was going to do a coffee table book of blaxploitation film posters, which had not been done at the time. And basically, I started designing it. I started putting together like a mock-up. And at a certain point, a friend of mine calls me. He's from LA. I lived in Brooklyn Heights at the time with my ex, Julian, and my other son, Miles, his mom, Rebecca. And I get a phone call from my friends like, oh, I'm reading this article in the LA Weekly about how Tarantino's, he's doing this movie, Jackie Brown, and he's also working on a book on blaxploitation films. And when I tell you, I went into like instant depression, like, because it was like, this is my idea. Nobody's done it. Is that, so I went into this like, woe is me. And I was going to have this and da. And so Rebecca at the time is like, literally, my ex is like driving me crazy. Like, contact Tarantino, like call him up. I'm like, yeah, right. He had just done Pulp Fiction. Like, yeah, sure, I'll call Tarantino. That's easy. I'll just do that. And then, so I was like, I had this job in American Eagle Outfitters, and I'm like moping every day. And like, we're sitting through dinners, and I'm like this, like, slouching. And she's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Oh, it's going to be my book. And just bitching about it. And every day she's just like, call, like call him. To a point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to make a call so she can shut up about that. She's driving me crazy. I can't listen to her telling me to call Tarantino's office anymore, So pick up the phone. I find the number. They were on Beverly Boulevard.
Band Apart?
This is Band Apart, yeah, when they were right where SBE was.
Okay, yeah.
And I guess Tamara Mellon is there now. I found out last night, coincidentally, from a friend. And so you know, I call, hey, yeah, I'd like to speak to Quentin Tarantino. They hang up the phone, you know. And then I'm like, okay, let me be smart. I like to talk to the person who's working on this project. Hang up, hang up, hang up. And I was calling every day. And then at a certain point, I was like, okay, it's time to step into like French asshole mode. And so this woman answered, and she's like, oh my God, can you please stop calling? Like, you know, I'm going to have to like get a restraining order if you don't stop. I don't remember what she actually said, but so I said, well, listen, I hear Quentin is doing this book. I have one of the biggest collections of, you know, black film posters and memorabilia and blah, blah, blah. And I know you're going to get fired if he finds out later on when I meet him that I tried contacting him to have this material in his book and you turned me away. So that's on you. Nice. So, you know, there's my number. Bye. You know, I hang up the phone. I kid you not. The next morning, I get a phone call from this guy, Jerry Martinez. And he's like, hey, is this Matthew? Are you the one like harassing, you know, whoever her name was? And I was like, yeah, I am, because, you know, I heard about this book and I'm doing my own book. You know, he's like, well, you know, basically he was kind of like, you're not Quentin Tarantino, so good luck with your book, you know, and we're doing our book. And I said, well, listen, if you guys need help on this book, I know you're already doing it, and it's not going to be my book, obviously, but why don't we merge the projects? You know, why don't I bring what I have? And, you know, I also, you know, have some pretty unique stuff. And no, we're done with the book. We have everything we need, blah, blah, but thanks for calling. And I was like, well, listen, I work at this job here. It's a big job, American Eagle Outfitters, but I'm not passionate about it. I will quit and come work with you guys on this book.
I love that.
And the guy's like, okay, psycho. Like, you know, he didn't say that, but you could feel the energy that he thought I was just some crazy guy. Calls me back the next day and he's like, hey, and I thought I'd ruined my chances because I was like, I was too aggressive. You know, I was like 20-something at the time.
Yourself, then.
And so, yeah, I'm like, you know, I messed that up. I was maybe 24 at the time. And so he calls me back the next day. He's like, hey, were you serious about coming out to LA? You know, because we're not completely done with the book, you know, and maybe you have some input, you know. And I'm like, say when? Like, just let me know when you want me to be there. And this was like on a Tuesday. And he's like, well, why don't you come to the office on Friday? And I was like, he's like, where do you live again? I'm like, New York. He's like, oh, wait, how's that going to work? I was like,
airplane.
Just give me the address. Like, I can get on a plane. And he's like, well, you know, that's kind of a lot, you know, I don't want you to like, you have a job. I was like, listen, this is my passion. This job is not my passion. And I wasn't even really like that appreciated there. I mean, it's just a big corporation, so it's not personal. There's just nothing like that I was passionate about. And I'd already proven myself as my work was very successful there. So he like calls me back and he's like, okay, well, come Friday, blah, blah, blah. And next to him in the car, I could hear they were in like some convertible car driving. It was really loud. I could barely hear what he was saying. And I hear some other guy, like it must have been in the passenger seat, going like, Pam Grier is Foxy Brown. Pam Grier is coffee. She'll cream you. You know, I'm like, I know that voice, you know. And then he's like, oh, yeah, hey, that's Quentin, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, my God. Like, I have chills again remembering it because I'm like, I just got there. Like, on this phone call, there he is. He's that close, you know. And so I'm like, holy shit, this is, okay. This works, like this kind of slightly bullyish way of approaching this thing, you know. Next thing I know, I get on the plane. I tell my job I got a family emergency or whatever. I get on the plane on a Thursday red eye or whatever. I get to LA.
You don't fully quit because you want to keep that just in case. This
yeah, I didn't quit yet because I'm like,
what
if I show up and they're like, you know.
Get out of here.
So again, talking about fate. I bring a stack of like press books from, you know, original press books, posters, and all that stuff. And I don't know why I picked like a bunch of Isaac Hayes materials, like, you know, Black Moses' Soul and Three the Hard Way, Truck Turner, all this stuff. And I don't know, I said Three the Hard Way. That's not Isaac Hayes, but Truck Turner is what I meant. And all this material. And I show up. And like this woman is like, who are you? And it turns out she's the woman on the phone. And she's like, oh God. Like, and I'm like, well, thanks. I feel very welcome. You know, she's like, really? And I was like, she's like, do you even have an appointment? I was like, yes, I would. How would I even know where to go? You know,
you ran into her.
And she's like, well, okay, let me call. And she's like, just annoyed. Like she's on the phone. Like somebody, like this guy's here. And she's like, oh, well, you sure you had an appointment? I was like, yeah, for sure. I talked to Jerry Martinez. And, you know, she's like, well, okay, well, I don't think they were expecting you. I'm like, well, he told me to come here, and I just flew in from New York.
Yeah.
And
Chop,
I wait for like an hour and a half, and there walks in Jerry Martinez, who looks exactly like Newman from Seinfeld. So I was a little confused, and he's wearing like some leather cowboy hat. And I'm like, and he's like, "You're Matthew?" I'm like, he's like, "I didn't think you'd come." I was like, well, "What do you think? You're telling me to come on a Friday? I'm not going to show up? Like, I'm not that person." He's like, "Oh shit, I wasn't really prepared for this." I'm like, "Hello, you told me to come. I flew from New York. Here I am." He's like, "Okay, well, come into the office." He brings me into his office, and there's like a, whatever the 1997 Mac, desktop computer was at the time. And he's like, "Well, here's a scanner. Here's like a digital camera that plugs into the computer or whatever. What'd you bring?" So I was like, "I brought a bunch of materials." He's like, "Well, let's do he's like, we haven't done anything on like musicians that were in movies." So I was like, "Oh, like Isaac Hayes?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow, I happen to have brought all this Isaac Hayes stuff." And Isaac's like the only musician that was in, a movie star in these films. All the other ones did the scores, like Curtis Mayfield. And so I'm like, okay, this is a trip. That works out. So he's like, "All right, I got to go to some meetings. I'll be back tonight. You just come up." Like, no direction. No. He's like, "Well, here's," he shows me like some of the book. And it turns out they have like 8 pages designed on this book that he told me was finished. So I was like, "Well, didn't you say you guys were finished?" He's like, "Well, not really." Like,
Welcome to Hollywood.
So yeah. So I'm like, okay, so now I got the pressure. I'm sitting in this guy's office. People keep walking by, and they walk in and say, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just here working on a thing for." "Well, do they know you're here?" Like I was like some imposter or something. And I remember even Lawrence Bender came in at one point. He was like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm brought in by Jerry to work on this book." He's like, "Okay." And then like all these guys kept walking through, like, who the hell is this guy we've never seen before? Because Quentin's operation is a pretty tight knit, thing. So I do this chapter. He comes back that night. He like has zero emotion. He looks at it. He's like, "Oh, it's pretty cool. That's pretty nice." So I'm like, okay, I guess not good enough, And he's like, "Well, go home and we'll call you if we need you, blah, blah, blah." But he's like, "But we have a designer already working on it." So I'm like, okay, well, I tried, and stay in touch. And, I'd love to send me a copy of the book, but, I'm still here if you need me, and I'll be here. And I guess he showed whatever I did to whoever, and then I went back to New York and then got a call, and he's like, "Well, would you be able to work on this project for the next 6 months or so?"
Wow.
And I'm like, "You got it." tell me when to come back, And so gave my notice at work, which was like, I didn't realize how much of a shock that was going to be to them, because they didn't react too well. But I gave notice, and then, about a week or so later, flew back to LA and started working on this book. And then they would say like, "Hey, since you're here, we're working on this movie, Jackie Brown. Can you help us with some ideas for this poster? We know we got a company working on it, but we want to do like a Blaxploitation style poster." So I find out that there was a guy who actually was doing what I came back to do, and they did a special poster for Jackie Brown, and the guy put it on his website portfolio, and so they fired him because that was a breach of contract the day that I called. Which is like, I feel bad for that guy. I don't even know who that is. But that, again, the weird twist of fate, that is like the day that I called him is the day they had to let go this other guy who was the guy designing the book. He was doing the poster stuff. So next thing I know, I'm designing like for Rolling Thunder, for Quentin's company, for reissuing old films. The poster for Sonatine, the Beat Takeshi film, the Lucio Fulci, the Beyond. I'm working on these Jackie Brown posters. And all of a sudden it's like, holy shit. Doing graphics. He was doing Switchblade Sisters. Like, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, the way that this thing happened. So we end up doing this book, What It Is, What It Was, and which is a rare book now. It's like at some point I want to do like my own book. Still, I still want to do that because of the Hollywood stuff. I ended up being credited as an associate designer, even though I designed the book. But that was another lesson learned about contracts and, making sure you know what you're getting into. And that, we won't get into that because that was a good lesson too. But that's how that ended up happening.
I just want to touch down on Jackie Brown. I know you're a huge Blaxploitation fan. your stepfather was Robert Forster, rest in peace.
He wasn't my stepfather, but he was dating my mom in the 80s
Okay.
for a while, yeah.
And
He's a
he just
great
passed
guy.
away. Amazing actor. And also, back to Quentin Tarantino, I've heard, well, I live down in Hermosa Beach, and there's a bail bond shop down there. And it's actually the basis for Jackie
Max
Brown.
Cherry's, yeah.
And the gentleman, I was in trouble once and actually had to get a bond. So I have a relationship with this gentleman because I see him in Hermosa, a little square mile town. And he talks about the time Quentin came in, and he would not take pictures.
Right.
He would send a sketch artist to sketch the office. And when Quentin came in, he said hi real quick, but just was all invasive of everything,
Right.
and going through his files, and just wanted it exactly like this bondman had his office. But I just thought that. And did you know that Robert was cast in the
Well,
film?
here's another great story. So while I'm there, it connects directly to the story to continue it. While I'm there working on the book, I meet Quentin in the office one day, finally, and he's like, "You're the crazy guy." He's like, "I love it, man." He's like, "That's how you do it." And we just like kind of hit it off, and we start talking about posters. And I remember he's like, talking about Navajo Joe, which is not a blaxploitation film, like Burt Reynolds Western. He's talking about when he loves this movie, and we just start talking about posters. And I'm like, man, I can find some pretty rare posters for you, which I ended up doing. And then, so one day he was like, since I had been helping them out on stuff, on the posters and things, he's like, "Hey, we're doing the cast and crew screening for Jackie Brown tonight." And at that point, I'm like, I think this was before I got to do anything on those posters. I think I was working on the Rolling Thunder stuff. And so I show up to the cast and crew screening, and I'm about to pass out because there's Pam Grier, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm standing like right in front of Pam Grier. So I say hello, whatever. And then here's Robert Forster, and I'm like, oh my God, Robert. So he's like, "Yeah, how are you?" Blah, blah. And I'm like, "Matthew." He's like, "Okay, Matthew." Like, "Good to meet you, man." And I'm like, "Mathieu Bitton." And he's like, literally, I like tears in his eyes. Like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "What are you doing here?"
How long had it been?
And how's
since
your
you saw him?
mom? So it had been a decade.
Okay.
Yeah. So I changed quite a bit from,
Sure.
14 to 24 or whatever.
Unbelievable.
And so he, he like can't believe it. We're having this, crazy moment. And how's mom and this and that, and so I reconnected them, and they're like stayed friends over the years, and then since then we'd get together for breakfast here and there, or we'd go to like a screening, or I'd see him at a film festival, and he was like the nicest guy, like really nice guy, very supportive. When I had my exhibition and the Darker Than Blue exhibition at Leica Gallery, he came on, and not the opening, but he came on off day, and I gave him a book, and he sent me, I was, so when somebody passes, you start looking through your text messages and stuff, and he sent me the most beautiful text about how proud he was and how touched he was by the work, and that he always knew, blah blah blah, like just really personal, beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And of course, I feel bad because it was like last time I saw him, he was like, "Call me when you're back in town, we'll have breakfast." And I didn't, because life gets crazy and whatever. But he was truly an amazing guy. And was so recognizant of the fact that Quentin brought him back, like literally from the dead as far as Hollywood goes. He was doing the worst B movies. But you know what? He never complained about that. He always said it was part of his path. He had to like sink to those depths. And then here's Quentin, walking into the Silver Spoon, where Connie and Ted's is now, over here. That used to be Robert's every morning. He used to be at the Spoon, and I always meet him there for breakfast, the Silver Spoon. And then when they closed to build Connie and Ted's, he moved across the street to Marco's till right before he passed. I mean, every day, if he wasn't working on a movie in Bulgaria or something, he was at Marco's, and before that, he was at the Spoon. So Quentin knew that that's where he was every day, and literally came into the Silver Spoon with a script saying, "Hey man, I wrote this for you, let me know what you think," because he was a fan of Robert's movies. And so it's amazing that he, Breaking Bad, El Camino came out the day he died, and that's like, he's got a great part in it. So the fact that Quentin did that and kind of resurrected his career, and that literally till the day he died he was working, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, life's so trippy. I mean, that you guys would cross paths like that, and just how you
Yeah,
got to
and
be.
again, you know,
You can't really prepare for anything, but you got to be fully prepared for anything.
yeah.
So you come work on that project, and now you're back in Los Angeles.
So I came back to LA. Then I finished the book in New York because we lived in New York, in Brooklyn Heights. And then at that point, you know, I had the opportunity to. I was doing freelance work, so to also pay my bills and stuff, I was freelancing for all these other
Album
clothing.
covers.
Well, no, not yet.
Okay.
That was still the clothing companies and stuff. I was doing album covers for like indie bands. I was also managing bands. There was a friend of mine from Montreal. They had a band called Sky Juice, and I was managing them and doing the art and all this stuff. And then I decided after that, the Quentin thing, I got to stay in entertainment. Like I don't want to go back to fashion full time. So I'll do freelance stuff. You know, like the Abercrombie and Fitches of the world. You know, it was the same kind of stuff as American Eagle, Aeropostale, and the Limited. I mean, I freelanced for all these different companies, but again, it felt like work. Like when I used to do it, you know, it felt like, oh God, I got to do a T-shirt collection for some, you know, whatever the brand was. Yeah, but for me, I was like, this is where I want to be. So.
How are you getting these gigs? Or do you have your resume and your book and everything? And
resume, book, like
networking.
For a while, I was like with this agency that like, you know, placed people for like freelance jobs. And
do you set your own price on that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, with the agency stuff, they kind of did, I guess, but I hated that whole process as well. So I didn't last too long with the agency because it started to feel like a temp agency, and
grinding too.
Yeah, and it just didn't. Again, it felt like I was working on things that, you know, probably like the coolest thing I did when I was part of that agency. They were called Project Solvers. I remember was a camp. I worked on a campaign for Absolute Vodka, and I was like, you know, I never drink, but I was like, it was a kind of a cool thing. It was the first time I remember seeing in the subways in New York, like, oh, I did that. You know, I did those graphics, and it was on all of the subway cars, like all over the city, and then that became more of a constant thing of design, you know. But
everyone has those moments. My friend Marcus Haney, who's did the film No Cameras Allowed and Austin to Boston.
I gotta check those out.
He remembered. He used to break in music festivals, and then he filmed it all.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah,
USC film student.
Yeah.
But he remembers the first time when Rolling Stone used one of his pictures.
Yeah, I've heard his story. I think I read an article about him.
You know, that was just like, okay, this is
it's a trip. Yeah, it's a real trip. Like when you start seeing, like, I mean, to this day, you know, like
hearing your song on the radio, same thing. You know,
yeah, it's like when Dave came back with the Netflix specials, you know, and there's a huge billboard in Times Square. You know, Dave's back with this thing that I shot. You know, and it's just like, I know I'm used to it. I've done movie posters and obviously album covers. Maybe like 1,000 of them by now. I don't know, but it's kind of a trip, you know, like when you see something that you've worked on and it's out there. But you know, there's always people that you always have to have somebody who sees the passion. Like I think I mentioned my friend Harry Wanger, who runs like all the catalog stuff at Universal, used to be at Polygram. Like he's the guy who gave me my first break at like working on funk compilations because he saw my collection. And we used to do this thing. We'd get together. It was called the Funk Lab in New York, and we'd all get together, a bunch of friends, and who were like record collectors and like funk aficionados, and we would put together these compilations that, you know, the Funk Essentials stuff that was really big back in the '90s, and we did like Funk on Film, which was like the Blaxploitation one, you know, and so all that stuff, you know, there still has to be somebody who is like, you know what? I want to like help this passionate guy and like give you a break, give you, you know, you can break in, you can get to the person, but then, you know, they have to allow you to do what you do. Another one is Jeff Aroff, who is a dear friend of mine who ran, you know, he ran like A&M, Warner Brothers for a long time, Records. He was a co-chairman at Warner's. And, you know, he was the first guy who was like, he was having me do projects as a graphic designer, art director. But then I was like, hey, you know, I also do photography. And he was like, okay, well, then you do the whole thing, you know. And then we did a project called Instant Karma for Darfur. It was a John Lennon, all these people from like REM to Regina Spektor. I mean, everybody doing covers of John Lennon. And they raised like $4 million for Darfur. So I'd worked on the campaign, you know, marketing and designed a million things and, you know, all for free just to help the cause. And at one point, it was like, I had an artist I was working with. I was still managing artists then as well. And I was like, you know, hey, Jeff, check these guys out. And he like signed my first artist, Trevor Manier, who's another dear friend. He signed him to his label. He had a label called Shangri-La with Steve Bing. And then I was like, hey, can I produce a song? Like, you know, because I'm like a music fanatic. I know I can get in the studio and produce a song for this project. And we recorded this John Sinclair, the John Lennon song, on an old Caliphone, you know, straight to vinyl. And this was kind of like before the Third Man thing blew up, you know. So it was like, now it's more common. Like Jack White does that stuff a lot. I'm sure he did before that. But it was like, we did that, and then there was an artist named Rocky Daouni from Ghana. Like, we did a track with him. I got to co-produce, and it was kind of surreal. Like, this guy was like, "Yeah, you do it. You can." And he's like, you know, was the chairman of Warner Brothers, you know, but believed in my passion and could say like, "Yeah, sure, you go shoot the album cover," and then, you know, in comes the Lenny Kravitz thing, and then
What year are we in now? Then you've moved
Like-
to LA. Then
moving. Yeah, I live back in LA. I have these two little guys, one of which Julian back there, and Miles, who's at Bard College in New York. So I have two kids. We came back to LA basically so Miles could be closer to the family, and he was born in December, so it wouldn't be like freezing, snowing, Brooklyn. So we moved back to LA. And then
real quick,
yep.
Miles, I follow you on Instagram too. You're a great photographer as well.
He's killing it. Yeah, I'm really proud of him. And yeah, he's I love it. It's so much fun to see. So so we're like, you know, early 2000s, and so I'm now kind of, you know, doing a lot of like soundtrack work for Warner Brothers. That all came from Jeff Aroff, like designing like the Transformers soundtracks and Harry Potter and Terminator Salvation, and like a lot of like these were big projects. And now I'm like fully in the music industry, you know, working for labels, working for all the major labels, doing a lot of box sets. You know, I'm working on Miles Davis box sets and War and whoever else. Like Marvin.
How many albums do you have to your credit? 1,500 or something?
No, I think maybe closer to 1,000 at this point.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it sounds completely surreal. Like I walk in with Julian and Amoeba the other night, and I'm telling him it's so funny still to this day to see like I did this one and that one and this DVD, like the Aretha Franklin Amazing Grace movie that recently came out that I did the poster art for, and then the new Marvin Gaye record and new James Brown record. So I do a lot of it is catalog stuff because it's just I love doing that stuff, you know. But so yeah, especially like Miles Davis, and they're all my favorite artists, and they're all the artists I had done fake covers for, like every single one of them. It's like that stupid movie, The Secret. You know, it's just like laws of attraction. There is something to it, you know.
Jim Carrey says, he says he carried around a check for $10 million, and then 5 years later, he was getting an offer for The Mask for $10 million.
Yeah, so I'm going to start doing that then.
Even the directors tell me, you know, do mock-ups of commercials or brands, and you
Right.
know that's what you presented. And it's a brilliant method. So Lenny Kravitz, huge. I've seen your guys' films, documentaries, YouTube videos. How does that come to be?
So now we flash forward to 2008. I'm working on I was working with a French actress named Émilie Loiseau, who's an incredibly talented artist, pianist, kind of multi-instrumentalist. She's on, or was at the time on Polydor in France. And so working with her, managing her, I'd kind of like stopped managing, but I was on the end of my management days because it just felt like that was not for me.
I've
It was
worked
a
with
thankless.
musicians, and it's a grind.
It is, and it is truly kind of thankless because I get the musicians, you know, needs and the ego and all that stuff. At a certain point, it's like I've got my own ego, and it's like, you know, I just don't want to be babysitting people.
Never have done that at the same time.
So with her, I was managing her for the U.S. and brought her out and did showcases and all this stuff. And so we were working on her new album. This was around the time that I was doing photography quite a bit more, like on stuff for Warner Brothers Records or other independent artists, or my friend Chris Pierce, who's a great artist, who's local
I love
here.
Chris Pierce. He
Okay.
plays down in Standing Room in Hermosa. What a voice.
Yeah,
he has.
Chris is like, man, he's a dear friend. Actually, I got to see him. It's been too long, but like we spent a lot of time together. I photographed. Chris is almost like I was like shooting all his stuff and doing the packaging and all this. Like he's, as far as like single artists go, is like, before I really like took off with Lenny stuff, I was like doing the same stuff for Chris, like filming EPKs and doing designing and shooting, and was in the studio. We were like together all the time, and then life got busier. He got married, all this stuff. But he's one of the greatest. Well, Chris Pierce is like literally one of the greatest voices ever. Like he's incredible. He's like Otis Redding of our generation, or Sam Cooke, or so. I want everybody to go listen to Chris Pierce's music because he's just incredible.
He pops in Hermosa Beach, the Standing Room, which is a great music venue in Hermosa Beach, playing with Kirk Fletcher, who's a blues background, and those two guys with the guitar and the vocals. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Probably like 6 years ago I was introducing him. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, we did. I worked with him on the Reverend Talltree also. That's just amazing. I mean, I did the art and photos for that. And like Chris is one of those people like, hey, Chris, you call me anytime. I'm there for you. There's a few people that's like, that's my brother, so basically I asked my friend Jean-Baptiste Mondino, who's a legendary photographer who did Prince's Love Sexy album cover, since we're in here, and on Madonna's classic stuff, and everybody, I mean, he's just like, he's done it all. And big music fanatic, great artist, and true music lover. We always send each other music and stuff. So I asked him if he would shoot this album cover, and did it amazingly for like, we didn't have a big budget, but he really liked her. That's Jean-Baptiste is one of those guys. If he likes the music, he's gonna do it. And while he had shot the day before, he had shot a music video at Lenny's house in Paris for Dancing Till Dawn, the song from Love Revolution. So this is right before. And I guess Lenny was calling him while we were shooting the thing. And he's like, hey, I'm in the middle of a photo shoot, but I'll call you tonight. And what photo shoot? This French artist, my friend Mathieu Bitton, is working with. He's like, what do you mean you're with Mathieu Bitton? Put him on the phone, And I get on the phone, and it's like, dude, I've been thinking about you. I can't believe you're here. Let's, give me your address. I'll come pick you up tonight.
Had you met before?
Oh, no, Lenny and I go back to the 80s. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
So Lenny, I should have said it before. So my friend, who's like my big brother, this guy Christopher Anuke, was my mom's assistant at JAG. I was talking about before. Uh-huh. He straight out of school, straight out of Parsons. And he was roommates with Lenny. They had a place on like up Hollywood Boulevard in the hills. And so I met Lenny back in the 80s, and we used to go to his mom's house and barbecues and all this stuff. The great Roxy Roker.
Different Strokes, right?
Jefferson's.
Yeah.
And so I used to see him a lot. And then he like came to my mom's house and stuff, my birthday once, like, just kind of, but we always talked music, and he knew I was like a funk guy. And at the time he was working on this funk record, Negrophilia, which is, I hope for everybody's sake, will see the light of day sooner than later, because it's the best record he's ever done. And bar none, like my favorite thing he's ever done. And it's like a true funk. I'm a funk, lover. So they're definitely, it's like real funk. It's not like, oh, we're trying to do a funk record. He's got the funk in him. And so basically picked me up at my dad's house that night. And then for the next like decade, I just ended up like, he definitely propelled me to another level of photography, because all of a sudden I was just shooting everything for him. And so he had a big hand in like me going from like, yes, I'm shooting album covers and I'm doing this here and there and shooting all my friends and doing these indie records, to like shooting magazine covers and, billboards and all this stuff. So that was a big push, from him.
Question for aspiring photographers out there. When you're with Lenny Kravitz, you're going around everywhere, and a magazine wants to do a photo shoot, how are you paid? By the magazine? Or does it go
by the magazines. I mean, like with Lenny, I was on retainer anyway, but whenever it was like outside stuff, I would always try to make sure that I was, and you kind of have to fend for yourself most of the time, like, because his team is just dealing with him, once in a while they would like help out, but or like, the publicist would always try, but
when you get, obviously you're very accomplished at this point, but when you get together with a famous group or some megastar like him, it just drums up so much business for you, right?
I mean, it can for sure. But that's the thing. You have to know how to turn it into other work, because the work just doesn't just come to you. It's weird. Like I thought myself, like, okay, like now my work is on these magazine covers, all this stuff, but you still have to go and grind. Like the grind never stops, because there's a million guys out there shooting, and
Yeah,
it's like looking for an opening act. Like I see like a friend of mine, would open for like Aerosmith or Lenny or anybody like that, and you think, okay, now they've been on a world tour with them, they're going to be huge. And once the tour's over, it's like, okay, now you still got to go on your own and make things happen, because nobody's calling saying, hey, can you come on our tour?
That's the misconception, though, about everything in the entertainment industry, is that you are just, for a photographer, you're going around and pressing a button a few times, and then you go back to the Ritz-Carlton, rest for 14 hours, and it's nothing like that at all.
Yeah, I wish I could have had one day like that in my entire career. I haven't, because even with the Dave stuff now, I'm working on a project with Ben Harper too right now. That's amazing record he's got coming. But there is no such thing as like shooting and going to sleep, because I'm always editing, and if you're doing video stuff, like I remember I directed a music video for Lenny, a song called Push off of the Black and White America album. So it was like 2011, 12. I don't remember when that video came out, but we were on tour in Europe, and I did this like Guns N' Roses Paradise City type video, on the road, and the tour bus and the bed and this and the concert. And I remember shooting like for like 24 nights or something, all kinds of footage, because I wanted to do cuts where it's like the same moment of him doing the solo, but in all different outfits, and it's like crazy thing. And I shot it myself and was literally editing on the tour bus while everybody was sleeping every night, for like weeks. Wow. and not sleeping. I was shooting on, like, at the time on like a Canon like 5D Mark II or Mark III, whatever it was at the time, Mark III, I guess. And this was before I like fully switched to Leica, but I was like doing that, and I remember like people were waking up on the tour bus. I was still editing, and it'd be like, what the hell, like, you've been there? I was like, well, yeah, we got a deadline to deliver this video. And I always did everything myself. I never used editors. So we did the Looking Back on Love documentary. Thank God I worked with an editor, but I still was there with him, editing. So yeah, it's a pretty intense thing. And same thing with photos now. Like, I just came back from DC, where Dave got the Mark Twain Prize, for comedy.
Wow, was that a cool night?
It was amazing, and it took me a week of editing afterwards to edit. I shot like so many thousands of photos, because his stuff goes around the clock. So I'm shooting the thing, the after show, the after show, the hotel thing, the jam session. It never stops. And then I'm like, oh Jesus, now I got to edit all this stuff. So when I have Miles, my other son, when he was on the road with me, I can torture him and be like, hey, okay, you go back to the hotel and start editing. And that's how he learned everything he's doing, by just doing. And like, okay, you shoot from that angle, and so it's like the real school of rock. And,
I'm teaching my girlfriend right now too. I'm like, you're a producer and a camera operator, and
hey, nothing is beneath any of us, like I feel like the more you learn, I love seeing that with Miles now. Like, it's so much fun to see him, like, my friends, like Robert Glasper had a residency at Blue Note. Now he's like the guy. Miles is shooting, when he's not in school, he goes every weekend and he's shooting it and doing all this stuff. And they're texting me saying Miles is killing it. Like, on top of it, super proud, that he didn't just like come with me for all these years and assist me and just decided, okay, now I'm going to like, watch movies all weekend. He's actually taking the train and going to shoot, and now he's doing his own thing. He went and shot Mos Def in Brooklyn, and
I saw those pictures.
It's like, and then Dave shows up and he's like, "Oh, well, you're Miles. Of course you can shoot." Whereas nobody normally would be like allowed to shoot, Dave or whatever.
That's got to be tough for him, though. Also having you as his father, but
I don't think it is. It's funny. I think he doesn't want it like I wanted it. So that's actually, he doesn't even know that that's what he wants to do. So he's just enjoying it, and he's got his Leica. Like, hey, I wish I was 19. I had a Leica like that when I was 19, but great. So it's like all this hard work actually can serve another purpose, and so great. Like, I'm not mad at it. You know, sometimes I get messages like, "Oh, nepotism," but I'm like, well, he's first of all, it's not like he's directing the new Netflix special because somebody put him there. He's doing his own thing, and he's killing it. And if he wasn't good, he wouldn't be there. If he didn't have his own eye, people would be like, well, he was with Common shooting in the studio. And, it takes a lot. It's like Common's a huge artist. And when I saw Common, he's like, yo, Miles is killing it. I love the picture. So it's like he's got his own thing. And
one of the nicest people ever, Common, too. He's from Chicago, and I always would run into him on the flights from LAX to Chicago. So, 2 or 3 times, but he sat next to me both times and just talked to me about Johnny Cash.
Super
and
nice guy.
All his influences.
Yeah, he's a sweet guy.
Talib Kweli and
I mean, Chicago, you guys came out with some good guys out of Chicago. You got President 2024 President Kanye West is from Chicago.
His story's incredible. He just started making beats, selling them for a couple $100,000,
I got to say, I love Kanye West. I know he does some stuff that, pisses everybody off. Sometimes me too, but actually we don't say me too. But he is really an amazing artist, and I like to just see the journey.
Has Kanye ever been in here, Nate?
Not that I know of. I think sort of he switched it all to like residential setups.
Okay.
Maybe recording in penthouses of hotels, but they're really private.
Yeah, because their gear is a lot easier than like Zeppelin or Sly and the Family Stone or
they're
guys
not
that have
having
been through here.
32 inputs at once. They're small camps usually.
He works a lot at Rick Rubin's studio, the Shangri-La in Malibu.
And that was once owned by the band Shangri-La, right? That was their studio they started, I think.
Yeah, it was Dylan. Well, also Rick
right.
Rubin. So I went there. I hung out there a couple times, and he has Dylan's old tour bus set up as a studio too.
I think they have like an API mix room in there. Yeah, they did some of Yeezus
exactly.
in there.
And I was in there with like Trombone Shorty was cutting something, and then I went. I think with Lenny once as well. Lady Gaga was there recording. I mean, Rick Rubin. That's another.
Trombone Shorty opened up for the Chili Peppers. Just
I went to see him.
Tour.
Yeah.
That was great.
That was a lot
I
of
saw
fun.
you. A quick question. I saw you at John Mayer shooting at the Forum.
Yep.
Now his photographer Daniel, right?
Yep. Good friend of mine.
So when you go to a concert like that, is there an exclusivity that he wants, Daniel wants, or you guys are friends? Are you shooting?
We're
for
friends.
John?
We're cool. I did the same thing when I was with Lenny for a decade. Like sometimes other guys would want to shoot. I never have an issue. I'm not like territorial about that stuff. Might be different if you want to like come to my bedroom and sleep with my girlfriend. I might be territorial. But as far as the the work goes, I'm cool because it's like again somebody at some point was cool with me shooting. So, and, a lot of these guys, I mean, Daniel's like amazing. He's quite a bit younger than I am, he's got like no ego about it. Like he was so cool. Literally at the Forum, I'm like hiding behind an amp and Daniel is telling me, so this is going to go down. This song's going to be over there. And I think John is going to be on that side. And there's going to be, so he was actually helping me out by telling me how to get the best shots, which I've done that with Lenny as well. Cause when you're on tour with somebody like that for so long, you end up knowing you end up kind of knowing what's coming or what, where he's going to be or, it just becomes kind of automatic. So I've never experienced, issues. Yeah.
Photo pits.
And it's just so nice even of John Mayer to be like, yeah, sure, come. I asked, I was like, hey, I'm in LA. Can I come shoot the Forum? And he's so respectful that he's like, let's make sure Daniel doesn't have an issue with it, which is so cool. Yeah. Like, it's so respectful. He's not just saying, like, it's, he's being respectful of,
just the amount of people contacting him from every angle.
Yeah, and I asked Daniel, he's like, of course, man, it'd be so much fun. Like, he actually, was like, all right, it'll be fun. I love
people like that.
So, and I think I try to surround myself with people like that, people that I respect and, aren't just about themselves and...
So back to Lenny, you guys, he takes a break around 2014, 15?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, he's been on tour pretty steadily, but yeah, there was a period of time where...
One of my favorite artists right now is Gary Clark Jr., but there's a picture of you,
Gary.
Lenny, and Gary, I think in
like
Italy?
Lucca, Italy or something like that.
That is such a cool picture when you guys are sitting by I'll put it up here, when you're sitting by the fountain there.
Yeah. I think it was Lucca. We've been hanging out quite a bit. Gary of the past, that tour and the previous tour opened like all the Italian shows, and he's such a great guy too. Like, again, one of the coolest, nicest people.
Yeah, his drummer's actually playing on my EP in this exact room next month. Johnny Radalat.
Yeah, nice.
And Pam Adams, his management, W Management, Scooter Weintraub. They've always been really nice to me because I'm a super fan, and I get starstruck.
Scooter's a really nice guy. I've known him a long time too.
Yeah, have you guys done projects with him with like Clapton and?
No, but I did go. Like, I went once. I think it was the first time I was in a private jet, so I'll never forget that. The 2007 Crossroads Festival. We went with I went on Steve Bing's plane, and it was quite like, you know.
Was that Chicago?
That was Chicago. Yeah, and then we get there. It was like on the plane. It was like, so I went with Jeff Aroff, who I talked about earlier, and like Mitch Glazer and all these guys, and we literally it's the most surreal moment of my life. The plane door opens and it's Bill Murray. Hey guys, coming in, and Jeff Beck, and everybody was there. That's when I met Tal Wilkenfeld, who's a friend of mine. That's the first time I met her. She's incredible, the bass player. So, you know, as we sit here, all these crazy stories come back to mind. They're all surreal, you know. But so Scooter. That's when I think when I met Scooter back then with Clapton.
Well, Gary got his big break when Doyle Bromhall brought him on stage. I think Clapton inquired about him, but Doyle set it up. Austin, Texas guys, and Gary exploded his single "Bright Lights" there. Did 2 numbers, and then the rest is history. I mean, he's just such a huge
right
talent.
Place at the right time, which is 99% of everything.
So
success.
I want to touch base on Dave and Sticks and Stones.
Okay.
Probably the greatest special ever. That raw, and I mean, just for
I'm tied between Bird Revelation and Sticks and Stones, but for selfish reasons.
Was Bird Revelation in the Belly Room at the Comedy Store?
Yeah,
right.
Where I had my little moment with that's what you were talking about, the T-shirt.
Yeah.
To go back to that, that's when I go up to bring him the Iceberg Slim book from my collection, and he says, "This is Matthew. Yes. Matthew's from France. He's white," and everybody laughs. But it has an original copy of that. That's where that's from. The T-shirt.
Iceberg Slim story. For people who don't know, the Belly Room holds probably 80 people.
I think 60.
There's 3 rooms in the Comedy Store, and I guess it's, from what I've heard, it's Dave's favorite room.
Yeah.
But he did the 3rd installment.
Although I think the Punchline in San Francisco is like his, the one he talks about. Yeah, he mentioned that the other night, yeah.
So Dave's working on his material for Sticks and Stones. Are you following him around at this point?
I was quite a bit, yeah. Last year was like really from the end of, actually a lot of 2018, a lot of 2019. You know, went to Europe a couple times with him,
and you're documenting this stuff. I mean, your whole life's been documenting just the most insane, epic moments. Are you just like, wow, this is going to really be a grand slam home run, and for a special?
I mean, part of it, I was like, I can't believe like he's going to do it, but he's going to do it. You know, so I was like really proud of him in that way, like that again, that he's just not going to stop at anything. He's just going to go with his, you know.
In 2019, I mean, this coming out at any time would be just such a shock, but I think it was so instrumental about just free speech and bringing people back to normalcy. And these are jokes and they're stories, and we can all be human. And there was something you could take from it, you know. It's like,
for sure,
especially about the transsexual woman that he had. What a
Daphne.
great story. Yeah.
Yeah, we had. I don't know if you heard, she took her own life recently. So that's a few weeks back. Yeah, so that was really sad because he talks about her in the epilogue, the punchline.
Yeah.
Sticks and Stones, and had her open for him the punchline not too long before she passed. So that was a kind of big shock for all of us, and very sad one. But that is a perfect example of also the misconception, that the press loves to make everybody a villain, And the thing about Sticks and Stones that's so funny, it's like you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 99% score rating for the public, and it's like 70,000 people voted, and then like 12 reporters, and it has like a 32%. And what's funny is it's like you read these reviews, and I always have the same thing where like they didn't even, I don't even think they watched the whole special because, even in Sticks and Stones, he says it where he says, if I make fun of you, I see myself in you. He talks about that. And that's an important thing. He basically says, hey, if I make fun of any of you, anybody, that because I see myself in you guys. And he even says that, he even gives it to the critics and the public by saying, like, these are jokes, like you said. This is, we're here to have fun. We're here to have a good time. And now, like, a perfect example of this era is, the Disney Plus channel just launched.
Yeah.
And how they had to put a disclaimer in the public that, well, we know some of these racial appropriations and characteristics of, and basically, like, we know these are not politically correct. Like some of the characters in the cartoons, are of the times of the 60s, and they might be misrepresenting cultures. And it's like, come on, like, you're going to apologize about King Louis and the Jungle Book? You know what I mean? Like we've gone too far, and I think that's Dave's point. I mean, it really started in the Bird Revelation, with the whole Me Too thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yes, everybody, I agree with him, and everybody should be accountable. But, if there's certain things where you're taking away somebody's entire life, and it's like, you look at he jokes about it, the Louis C.K. thing in Sticks and Stones. But it's like, can you go to jail for that? Not really. So it's like, should you lose your entire life over it? Harvey Weinstein, yeah, go for it. That dude is like a monster. But there's just, limits. And I see it even in what I do. Like, I can't even, there's certain things I'll post on my stories. I have this collection of black ephemera from the 20s and 30s and 40s and all these posters and statues and jazz statues. And, I'll post something and somebody will be like, oh, that's so racist. And I'm like, well, do you think that's why I'm collecting it? No, I'm collecting it because I'm a jazz fanatic. I love this era and stuff. And it also is an important part of history. And guess what? Whoopi Goldberg collects all these same things. So does that mean she's racist, Or like, I'll post, like, because I'm a big Woody Allen fan, like I'll post like a scene from Annie Hall, which I think is like the greatest movie of all time, the smartest movie of all time, and people, like, I get messages like, oh, I didn't know you were supporting pedophiles. And I'm like, actually what I'm doing is I'm sharing a really smart clip and really funny,
Sorry.
It's like, yeah, it's like, come on, like, let me enjoy my
outrage
entertainment.
Culture,
it's like,
recreational outrage. You see it all over the internet, obviously, and Facebook, Instagram. It's just battling. And I thought Sticks and Stones helped that. It was kind of like, let's calm down a little bit.
It changed the narrative a little
stuff.
bit. Yeah, it definitely changed the narrative.
I think also just coming from an African American, even it's the greatest comic ever, one of them, him saying that just had more power, I think.
Yeah.
So you finish up with Dave. What are you working on now?
Well, more Dave stuff, and then like I mentioned, I'm working on a record with Ben Harper, working on another Marvin Gaye project.
And you're a photographer on the Ben Harper?
Yeah. I think I'll be doing the art as well.
Director as well.
Yeah, and what else? I mean, I feel like I've got I'm working on some bigger projects like that involve me, that are that I don't really like know much about yet, but like documentary stuff. And
have you ever thought about doing a podcast? I mean, the access to people and friends and insight, and I mean, just
I've
talking about
definitely,
like a camera would be.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it. However, I'm more excited about Julian's got a whole idea of like a sort of podcast interview show. So I might be more inclined to like help him get his done, and then maybe later in life I can do something. But
Julian Bitton on Instagram.
Yeah, and so we're kind of like helping put that together right now. But yeah, I've had there's like I've been approached about actual TV show, that would be kind of.
Oh, wow.
Like that. So
Vice or something, I could see that.
It was coming from France, but we'll see where it ends up. But
do you go back to France often?
I usually do. I haven't been in a year, which is crazy, but I've just been too
tours,
busy and touring with Dave in the States and stuff. But I was in London and Germany, but I didn't make it to France this year. But so yeah, I think I always see those things. It's like I started writing a book at a certain point about all this stuff. And I always get kind of artist block, like a writer's block. It's like people are going to think I'm like full of shit. Like half of these stories sound like impossible. You know what I mean?
You know what really just recollects your memory though is having all those great little artifacts and press passes and photos. And
you saw that photo I posted the other day. It was like hundreds of laminates in a box.
And I'm just like,
as I'm packing, like I said,
there's no way you could remember all this stuff you've experienced.
I literally had like a laminate for Erykah Badu show in Austin that I don't even remember going. It has my name on it, so I'm like, well, I guess I was there. You know, I've got the laminate with my name on it.
Was she at Dave's party, the after party for his award? Who was there?
Yeah, she was there.
Okay.
Yeah, the performance was insane. It was like Fred put this show together, Yone, and it was like Erykah, Common, Yassine Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, Thundercat, Q-Tip. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, that's the thing with Dave is like he really brings on the. Everybody shows up for Dave. You know, it's like even the thing at the Belly Room the other night, I'm like Paul Rudd and DiCaprio and Robert Pattinson and this one and that one. I'm like, just, you know, the people who you think are the biggest people are like fanning out over Dave. It's like
it's big time in the music world. Even at Chappelle show, you had the best acts ever.
Kanye West's first performance ever is on Chappelle show.
Common. Yeah, he talks about that. And then also, I mean, that's kicked off Block Party.
Yeah.
That was just such an epic lineup of artists on that.
Yeah.
I just have a few questions that I want to freeball. Nate, do you have anything you want to ask?
How long was it after the Weinstein news came out that he shot the special in the Belly Room, Dave? Because I feel like it was like only 5 weeks to prepare that.
Yeah,
hour.
it was like very close.
That was really impressive. I just wanted to mention that because we were on that.
Hi, I'm here for my 3 a.m. with Harvey Weinstein. Hurry up, I got a 4 a.m. with, what's his name? I'm spacing on the Rush Hour producer.
Yeah.
Brett Ratner.
Yeah, I got a 4 a.m. with Brett Ratner. It's really dark in here. I mean, his stuff is just, it kills me.
What's been some of the most exciting items to look out for when collecting?
Man, you know, I have so many collections that, I mean, it all kind of somehow makes sense to me, but I still am pretty heavy in finding like black film posters, like rare black film posters, you know. And like I mentioned, like the 20s, 30s jazz statues and things. Books, I've really, you know, I have a pretty massive, like Iceberg Slim collection, obviously, one of his books being in the Bird Revelation. But yeah, I don't really know because I feel like I'm always like, first of all, I'm on eBay and like live auctioneers and stuff like every day. I'm at a certain point looking for stuff. Auctions, I go to flea markets a lot. I found some amazing, you know, amazing things in flea markets you wouldn't believe. But yeah, same theme, you know, rare records and soundtracks and stuff.
Who are some of your favorite Motown artists?
Oh, man. Well, Marvin obviously is like, I think Marvin's Hear My Dear record, which I got to work on the deluxe edition of, is for me like the most honest record ever. You know, it's about his divorce to Anna Gordy, and I don't know if you know the story about Hear My Dear, but basically he, you know, was in a divorce settlement or in court, and it was decided that his next album, all the proceeds from the next album would go to his wife. So he decided he was just going to make this brutal record talking about all of their shit, like out in the open. And it was one of the best songs ever. When did you stop loving me? When did I stop loving you? You know, like Anger, like all these songs. So to me, that's like the greatest Motown record. But also, you know, I mean, all this, that Stevie era of, you know, Intervisions, Fulfilling This First Finale, Songs in the Key of Life. I mean, there's too much. Like, there's just too much. You know, the Leon Ware's Musical Massage. That's one of my favorite records.
I love the Temptations, but you know, David Ruffin's voice is just gives you chills. It's just raspy and just so real.
Yeah.
Nate, you big into Motown?
Yeah. I mean, sonically, like I think it's like super inspiring. Their use of multiple mono presentations of sources, spring reverbs. So sonically, it's super inspiring for me.
The Cooley High soundtrack on Motown. You know, one of the classic Blaxploitation. That was like the first sort of compilation soundtrack.
Who was the director on that?
Coolie High. Oh man, was that Ivan Dixon? I'd have to double check it. Let me double check it so I don't look like an idiot.
Film history class when you're talking about.
I just watched it again too. One of my favorites. And there's the famous Boys to Men covers. It's so hard to say goodbye by G.C. Cameron. People didn't realize that was not an original song.
I didn't know that actually till right now.
Well, yeah, G.C. Cameron. So let's see. Oh, Michael Schultz, of course. Michael Schultz directed it. Who also did Car Wash. Written by Joel Schumacher when he was, pretty young.
And they shot that over in Inglewood, right here in Los Angeles.
Daddy Rich.
Baron Woolman.
Yeah.
I've been looking at some of his stuff lately.
Great photographer for Rolling Stone.
But a short period at Rolling Stone,
Yeah.
too. Just the 3 or 4 years, 65.
Miles Davis,
69.
Bitches Brew era. Yeah.
What I'm getting at is I wanted to see, do you kind of go back to a lot of your models, a lot of your artists, a lot of people, street photography is African Americans. And what is it kind of the music culture that brought you into that world, or the Blaxploitation?
It's probably from the not just Blaxploitation, but the black film obsession. Like Gordon Parks, for example. He directed Shaft, and then Gordon Parks Jr. directed Superfly the following year. But I actually discovered Gordon Parks that way, and then realized oh wait, you mean he's the greatest photographer of all time? I didn't know when I watched Shaft originally because I was so young. I was 13 or something, and that here's this guy who was a Life magazine photographer, award-winning photographer, started as a fashion photographer, did all this incredible stuff. And so he was the main inspiration for my Darker Than Blue exhibition. But again, I didn't go look at anybody's work and be oh, I need to do this. I just was shooting, and all of a sudden I'm oh, there's a theme here that's obviously influenced by the Eli Reeds and Bruce Davidson, who I got to hang with last year. Wow. In Germany at Leica. He was getting a big award while I had my exhibition. And so I think the influence is obvious, and a lot of it because in high school I was so obsessed with all these movies and collecting the films, and started collecting the artifacts. Melvin Van Peebles, I got to photograph, and that's another thing.
Favorite photograph that you've taken, right?
Yeah, 100%. Still, I haven't beat that. The one from his hand portrait. It's like a hand portrait. Yeah,
we're gonna put that up. Melvin Van Peebles. Where was that shot at?
So another, everything is connected somehow. So I meet a friend at an early screening of Amazing Grace, the Aretha Franklin that my friend Alan Elliott put out. It took him a very long time to make this thing happen, for it to finally come out. We were at a screening at William Morris Endeavor, I think. And I'm sitting next to this really nice woman. Her name is Jamie Kailani, and was a friend of Alan's, I guess. We kind of hit it off and started talking. And, she starts talking about her son as an artist. He's a painter. His name is Marley Van Peebles. I'm like, wait, your son's name is Marley Van Peebles? Any relation to the other MVP, and the other MVP is they're all Mario, Marley, Melvin, it's all MVPs. And so she goes, oh yeah, my ex-husband is Mario Van Peebles. I'm like, wait a minute, Melvin is very important to me. So she's like, oh well, I'll I said my dream is to photograph him. She's like, well, he's a unique character, he's different. He's not going to just let you in there and photograph him, but he's cool, and if he likes you. So basically it was July 2016. I was in New York, and she set up for me to go with Marley to hang out with Melvin, and she's like, bring your cameras, but keep them in the bag, because I'd met him once before, and I know he can be really aggressive and takes no bullshit, So basically I'm in there in his apartment. It's kind of a museum in itself, of his history and all kinds of art and interesting stuff, and piles of books everywhere, newspapers, and eccentric kind of environment. And so we just started talking, and I started talking about his work. And the initial reaction, which I've gotten many times over my career and all over the years, He's like, man, what the fuck do you know about this, you white dude? Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't con me. Like, I've gotten that a lot. Don't con me, man. I'm like, and I start talking about this stuff. Well, I do have this edition of this book and that edition of American in Hell and this. And
Prove yourself.
I have the only known poster of La Permission, the French, his first French story of a 3-day pass movie, that came out in France. And he doesn't have it, but I have it. So I'm like, start to talk about all this stuff. And he's like, wait a minute. And we start having this conversation. And he's like, well, man, didn't you come to take my picture? Take my picture, motherfucker. And I'm like, and then we end up spending like the entire afternoon there and shooting. And we had such an amazing time. And that's happened with me with Sidney Poitier and Belafonte, all these people that I end up meeting because they realize this isn't just a hustle. This isn't like, here's this white Jewish kid from Paris, who is looked on the internet, and trust me, I've met those guys a lot, who are like Google geniuses. They know everything because they've got the phone under the table. And sometimes the greatest thing about that is a lot of information is wrong on Wikipedia and on Google. So sometimes people are like, yeah, man, I love that movie Coffee Brown. I'm like, you mean Foxy Brown? Because there was something where it was like wrong on Wikipedia for a while, and so I end up like the energy of that moment, the history of my collection, the whole thing is in that picture. Like that's why I felt like I like that picture so much. Breaking through the ice of the personality, like of this guy who at first is very cold and aggressive, but then is like, and then literally when I left this place, like next time you come to New York, you got to stay here, man. We got to hang out some more. Great. That happens a lot. And I had an incredible experience with Sidney Poitier a few years ago. Also showing him, a lot of my collection, and it was like an emotional roller coaster for me because it just, it's overwhelming sometimes to see what these guys to see these guys go back to that time, and having these artifacts is really a way of, it's like a time machine. Like I consider my whole thing like kind of a time machine. Like, I can show up in Sidney Poitier's living room, or like Max Julien, who's a friend of mine who played Goldie in the Mac, he wrote Cleopatra Jones, and over have this experience of showing them something and they start crying, or they're like, they can't believe, they've often never seen this stuff, because I'll have like Egyptian posters or Argentinian posters or Czech posters, like stuff from all over the world that they never saw. They saw the US one sheet when the movie was out, and maybe if they were traveling in France, they might have seen the French poster. There was no internet, there were no books on all this stuff. So I'm the book, I'm the history, like I'm bringing something into their living room, and every single time when they react to a certain poster a certain way, I give it to them, because I'm like, at this point, if I keep it, it's just selfish, it's just hoarding, like, because I see that reaction, and it was like, I feel like that's what's meant to be. Like, that's why I've had these things, like giving Max Julien this Egyptian poster of the Mac, which 2 copies have been seen, I think, of that. Or Sidney Poitier had this amazing Argentinian Lost Man poster, and I'm like, here I am in his house, and his wife Joanna Shimkus, I didn't even realize was his wife. And the poster that I bring, I opened, the first poster is them together on the movie they met on, and they're still married, from like 68 or 69. And so all this stuff of just like, wow, like, again, I brought this, but I didn't know they were even married, I didn't really know what like his personal life was, or, I just knew he had a daughter in a Tarantino movie, and so it's just kind of like, I come in like for the Poitier thing. I'll tell that story real quick if you have time. But like, I know you can edit a lot of this stuff later, so it's good. But so Lenny was in town, and he and Denzel Washington are good friends, and they were going over to Sidney Poitier's house, and so Lenny asked me to come shoot some photos of them, which I used to do a lot. Like he would be with somebody, and I'd run over and get some photos and go back to my life, and then he said, well, hey, you should bring some of your collection to show him, which I was like, can do, and it's not organized. So I had to like go through all this stuff and find a stack of posters, including, I also have original paintings for movie posters, like a part of my collection, and like the one I found last night, Black Caesar. But so I had the Slender Thread. There's this famous French artist in the 50s and 60s named Boris Ganson. He did a lot of the famous movie posters in France in that era. and I have like 2 concept paintings for the movie The Slender Thread with Anne Bancroft and Poitier, Sidney Pollack's directorial debut. And so I'm like, I'm bringing this, to show him, and a bunch of posters, and so he's dealing with dementia, Sydney. And so when I got there, it was very quiet. He was kind of like, sitting on his couch, very nice. He's like one of the most beautiful faces anyone's ever seen. He's kind of radiant, but he's not, he's obviously,
Yes.
90 years old. He was 89 at the time. It was on the eve of his 89th birthday. So
Wow.
his last day of being at 88. And so I get there and I take photos of him, and they're really cool. And he's smiling, and Lenny and Denzel and all the kids, the daughters are there, and a couple other people. And I'm like, okay, I've done the photos that I came here to do. Like, let me show you some posters, And so I start unfolding these posters, and Sydney was like kind of folded into himself, on the couch. He's looking, he's not talking much. And the best description is, when you see those time, what do you call them? When you see like a sunset in slow, fast.
Time lapse.
Time lapse.
Yeah.
It's like a time lapse of a flower blooming. He was literally like this, and he just kind of like opened up, and he's smiling, and he like moved forward. And I look at his family and his wife and his daughter, and they're all like right away in tears, and he's like, young man, this is incredible. And he starts telling me stories from the movies, and he's like, oh, I remember that day with blah, blah, blah. And he starts telling me all this stuff, and I'm showing more and more posters of different movies, like Big French Lilies of the Field billboard that I have, all original stuff. And some of it's really incredibly rare, And again, I'm like, this is why I'm on Earth. These moments, this is why I've been collecting all this stuff. He's got tears in his eyes. I'm like, Sidney Poitier is sitting across from me, with tears in his eyes because of this material that I'm showing him, And then you get to this poster with him and his wife, and they start telling me the story of that's the movie, that's how they met on that movie, and how he courted her and other stuff. And I'm blown away. Everybody's blown away. Denzel actually took some photos of an iPhone of Sydney's reaction, and he's like this, like, jaw dropping, it was incredible. And then, so I'm like, they're like, look at us, it's this beautiful poster. I'll send you a picture of the poster, and it's just like them together. So I said, please keep it. Like, obviously this means a lot to you. You should have it in your house. And Sydney's like, he gets up and like grabs me by the arm, takes me into the other room, and he's like, it was so classic. He takes like a wad of $100 bills out of his pocket, and he's like, okay, tell me how much for the poster. I'm like, man, you're insulting me. Are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? And here I am in this moment with Sidney Poitier, just the two of us in the hallway or the kitchen. It was so emotional for me. I don't even really remember where we were standing. But then he gave me this long, like almost uncomfortable hug, and he's like, thank you, you're my brother, all this stuff, like, thank you so much. And I remember the strangest thing he said, which is not at all true, but somehow in his head he was like, you're a genius. And I'm like, well, how does that make me a genius to have a collection? So that didn't make sense to me. And but somehow in his head, whatever happened, it was like the genius was the moment, because it brought him back to life. Like, it really brought him back to a certain time. He came alive like he hadn't been obviously in a long time, because if you saw, everybody in the room was in tears, And then, so he, took the poster, and then his wife had this sculpture, or they had this sculpture on a shelf, and I was like, oh, that's Goldscheider. And they look at me like, wait, the sculptor of this, I was like, well, I collect these things, so we start talking about this stuff. And then so that was an incredible night. We stayed there quite a bit. And then about 2 weeks later, I got the most incredible letter from him, just.
I've seen that on your Instagram.
Yeah, it's like, it's the greatest moment of my life, maybe one of the, as far as the passion thing goes, because imagine like receiving a letter like that. And then he sent me a copy of his book also, May the Wind Always Be at Your Back, but just incredible. And his daughter came to my opening later that year at Leica, and, was talking again about like, that was like a surreal moment for all of us, because it was like a time machine. Like, we got to see that that's all still there. like if you talk to him about it on the normal circumstances, he's not really like connecting to it. But seeing the visuals of all that, and I talked to him about doing a coffee table book of all his work, which I got to get back on because I've been a little too busy. But these, all these things are projects that I have to do at some point, because I have all this material. But that's an example, again, whether it's like the Max Julien thing or Poitier or Belafonte, who I worked with on a project, for people to see that, and this is what I would hope for the youth today, is like, that's the only way of really keeping this stuff alive, keeping like, it's really easy to forget culture. It's really easy to forget a period of time. It's easy to forget people's names. It's easy to forget the musicians that played, the guy who played bongo on I Want You, or, or Wawa Watson. It's easy to forget the names of people who have given us the culture that has made our lives. Like you listen to a certain record. Here we are in Studio 3 at Sunset Sound. Like you listen to certain music, and it's like, it's important to keep all that history alive. And like, that's what I do to keep it alive. I work on all these box sets and all these compilations, all these things. I collect these artifacts, that at some point I'm going to do a book on my collection as well, which is going to have to be like a 1,500 page book, but, or maybe I'll do multiple books, but that's the thing that you can't fake, that's the thing that you can't con, is that passion. For whatever reason, I was born with it, and I'm here to so I also think that's why I've ended up working with the people I've worked with, is because I connect on with certain artists on another level, because they know that I understand the artistry. It's not just like, hey, this is a job, I got to pay bills, so here I am. A lot of the stuff I've done, I didn't make any money for, but it brought me to, the jobs that end up paying my bills, and I still do that. There's still like, you can't just be all about getting paid, and you have to be respected. That's the most important thing, but.
And also the personal trust that they have
the Iceberg Slim thing is a perfect example. And that's when I knew, when I say Dave is like the greatest guy, is like the day we had the show at the Forum with him and John Mayer for New Year's Eve. So I guess not last year, the previous New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. And that's the day Equanimity and Bird Revelation came out. And, I'm like waiting for midnight to watch the special, because I was just excited to watch the specials, to see my photos in the credits, because it was such an honor, again, to have my pictures in the end credits and opening credits in the case of Equanimity. And so I'm watching the special, and then I go to Bird Revelation, and I watch thing, and he's like, there's a book, he starts talking about Pimp by Iceberg Slim. And no part of my brain, not 0.00001%, could think that moment would be in the special. There's no way. Most people would like obviously cut it out, because it looks way cooler for him to just cut to having the book in his hand. Like, there's a book by Iceberg Slim, here. But no, he's like, hey, yeah, bring it. Okay, this is Matthew, that whole thing. And I'm watching it, I'm like freaking out, right? It's like late night, like I wake up everybody in the house or whatever, like, this is crazy, like, you got to see this. And I'm like, what would make a guy like him, who's like the top of the top, what would go through his brain that says, yeah, we should keep that in, that's cool, And I'm like, me bringing him the book, like, why? There's no part of it that makes sense for the special. Like, it's just the same if he's just got the book in his hand. So that night before the show, I'm like, I remember he had a cold and wasn't feeling too well, and I was like, I got to go see Dave before. I'm not going to be able to concentrate until I talk to him about the special, So I walk into his dressing room. He's like, you watched the special? And I was like, yeah. I was like, dude, how? Why? And he's like, what am I going to say? He's like, what am I going to say? This is my book. Like, all of a sudden it's my book. No, you're the one who spent your life collecting these things and finding these rare books and posters and all these things, and this is your collection. What am I going to pretend it's mine? And I'm like, well, that's what makes you Dave Chappelle and makes everybody else, because to him it made absolute sense. Like, there's no way he's going to take credit for that. Sure. But to me, I'm like very much used to other people taking credit for a lot of these things, and I've been through that a lot as well. So that was just another moment where I'm like, forever in this Netflix special, because I collect these things, is that book that I got in high school or whatever. That's like really impossible to find a first edition because it didn't hit right away. So you find the later editions are easier to find, you know. But so I mean, just an example of, again, so I think it's all related. It's all connected. This passion, collection, obsession is related to the work, and it's influenced a lot of my work, obviously. And, you know, when I started out doing the album cover, I straight up was just stealing, you know, from like Blaxploitation titles. And, you know, I did the first Funk Essentials series I did. I was also a huge Saul Bass fan. I mean, still am, who did, you know, a lot of the classic movie posters, all like Anatomy of a Murder, Man with a Golden Arm, Carmen Jones. And so I was like biting his stuff, like the Funk Essential Ballad collection. If you look at the graphics, it's like pretty much, you know, bit on Saul Bass, you know. So it's influenced, you know, everything I do.
It's just so remarkable that people are just meant to do certain things, and it's like those little moments where, you know, you're in Sidney Poitier's house, or, you know, I'm sure there's a few other moments that you've had, and it just you can't even freeze it in time, but it makes all sense to you.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
It's, you know, God's with you, or there's a spiritual essence to the whole. You know, I can't imagine. I was getting
Black
chills when
Moses
you were
is with
telling
me.
that. Yeah, I mean, it's just so surreal, and just, you know, the gratification you feel, and just that you're making a, you know, an impression on this legend that also is, you know, is having health problems, and
Right.
it's so fascinating. You're so fascinating.
It definitely, I still, the thing I hope I never lose is that thing I still get all the time where I'm like, I can't believe that just happened, you know, like I don't ever want to lose that feeling, you know, because it's still, everything still feels new, you know.
That's what the greats say, though. It's like, you know, when Bruce Springsteen talks about that, you know, he still gets nervous, and how he's just, you know, he's still excited to do shows, and
Right.
you know, I'm sure after the 100th it's a little repetitive, but yeah, it's just, everybody's human, and
Right.
we all you know, just want to do what we're supposed to do, or, you know, just being a good person, being honest,
sure.
working hard. What's
Yeah, dishonesty will catch up to you after a while. You know,
Oh.
a lot of people have succeeded through dishonesty, but
that's easy to spot too. you
yeah, at
know?
a certain point it'll catch up to you.
You can go on someone's Instagram and pretty much figure someone out for the most part. Real quick, you and Julian Lennon teamed up for a Leica series or a gallery?
Well, we basically had our exhibitions like coexist. So he had his cycle exhibition. I had my Darker Than Blue exhibition. So we did it in LA and in Germany, and Frankfurt. Yeah. So it wasn't like collaborative, but it was us together presenting our exhibitions. Great guy.
Excellent. I could sit here with you for 4 hours and discuss
I know,
everything.
I feel like I'm babbling,
But your Instagram is just I think everybody has an Instagram nowadays, and it's just amazing to get a glimpse of your photos and your life. And I think just your stories are so refreshing and interesting. And just, you go through the Mathieu Bitton collection hashtag, and it's just all this cool stuff that even, I'm only 36 years old, but I've experienced a lot of these films and seen things. It's like, oh my gosh, he was, you share with what you've worked on and insight. And I think, anybody that wants to follow you or is interested, your Instagram's Candy T Man.
Which, because people always ask me why Candy T Man.
Oh yeah.
There's a really bad blaxploitation film called The Candy Tangerine Man.
Oh yeah.
And about a guy who's like a pimp by night and family man by day. And it's so bad that I just love it. It's like Sam Jackson's, that's one of his favorite movies. And it's just like terrible. And the music is by a band called Smoke, and the music's funky, But so when we worked on Funk Essentials back in the '90s with Polygram, my friend Harry Weinger, we all had like nicknames. And when I worked on the Quentin book, we used to like bring in different movies and stuff, and that's one that I brought in, I think, and everybody started calling me Candy Tangerine Man, and then I was like, well, I can use that. And then when I had to like do my corporation, I was like, yeah, Candy Tangerine Productions, and it just kind of stuck. But it's based on that.
And your website also, MathieuBitton.com.
Yeah, either candytangerine.com or MathieuBitton.com.
That's just so interesting too to get. I mean, it's just so vast your work, where it's like it goes back to you managing bands in New York to Lenny Kravitz, the Prince reissues, and Marvin Gaye reissues, and I mean, just I don't even know. You have so much stuff. It's exactly what I said. I'm gonna use my line again: cross pollination, superstorm of capturing greatness. Mathieu Bitton, you're an amazing person. Thank you so much for spending.
Oh,
this
thanks
Sunday
for
with
having
us.
me on this Sunday, and especially in here.
Studio 3, Sunset Sound. What was the last time you shot something here? Did bands have you come in to just shoot in the studio? Kind of
I've been
the
like
scenes?
we did something in here. I was in here with Lenny a couple years ago, but the last time I was here was actually I did some photos of David Z, who was a collaborator of Prince's since the beginning, since '78. Co-produced the song "Kiss," which I'm pretty sure was recorded in here. My friend Dwayne Tudo will kill me if I'm wrong, but he recorded so much of his music in here.
I would imagine it looks pretty much the same.
I think it looks the same. Yeah.
The studio is very untouched. The room was put in '75, and it's almost all original. Same console.
Yeah, maybe they changed the doors or something.
Yeah, and I think the ISO is the piano ISO is
Yeah.
a little different, but it's original.
The wood
But
paneling.
yeah, just the thought, like, so yeah, they were working on something for the Prince estate, which I can't talk about, but I came and got some photos in here. Here's a funny story that happened in this very room, actually, recently. So David Z, at some point in my collection, because we didn't talk about the fact that I have a massive Prince collection, but that's how it all started, really. That was my first thing that I collected, was Prince stuff. But so at a certain point, I bought what I thought was a holiday card. It has Prince's symbol on it, and it says, like, thanks. It's his writing. Thanks for the cookies. Me and the band, especially Michael B, are getting fat. Blah blah blah. Love Prince. But the bottom of the card is burned, so the Prince part is burned out. Like, I thought somebody was mad or something and lit the card on fire and then put it out, realizing, oh my God, what am I doing? So I bought that from somebody years ago. I don't remember when. And while we're here talking, so David Z is sitting right there is mixing some Prince stuff for the console, and I don't know how we got to it, but he said something about, he had a big fire in his home in Minneapolis, and that all his stuff was lost, like his gold records and all the stuff he had from Prince and blah blah blah, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, fire. Okay, I think I've heard of that. Your fire. And I said, would this make any sense to you? A card where Prince is talking to somebody about making cookies, and he just went like this. He was like, yeah, my daughter, she made cookies for Prince, and he sent her a card thanking her for the cookies, saying that his drummer was getting fat. It was big Michael Bland, big dude. And he goes, but it all burned in the fire. And I was like, give me a minute. So I live like blocks away. And so Michael Howe is here, my friend who's the supervisor for the estate stuff. I went home, took this thing out of the envelope, I had it in, drove back here, right there at the console. I put the card. I have a picture in my phone of that card on the console, so I'll send you that too.
Yes, please.
I put the card down on the console, and I was like, here, give it back to her. And he was just like, I don't even think he had any emotion. He was so shocked. And the fact is also to realize that the fireman or whoever actually stole all these things and sold them, and just said, yeah, everything burned in the fire. Because the guy that I got that from also had like Sheila E. gold records that were presented to David Z. So just a full circle thing of ending up in this very room. And here we are talking about it in the studio.
Oh, we need that picture.
Yeah. And just like, and now it went back. Like, was it like hard to separate from, because it cost me a bunch of money and I want to keep every single thing I have? Yeah, I was like, wow, this is weird to but it felt like this is why I have it. Once again, that's why that came into my possession and not somebody else's possession. I have a record signed by Prince to his dad that I have in my collection that I've been offered a lot of money for, because it's the only thing known to be signed from him to his father. You know, I have, you know, there's just these things that are just like somehow end up in my possession. But that's a story that actually happened in here. But I've been in here a bunch of times, obviously. But
my dad, rest in peace. Actually, I was born in Minneapolis, but
oh wow, okay, there's a connection.
And my mom was going to the University of Minnesota. We lived in Minneapolis, and my dad would tell me how he went to the same bank as Prince's dad.
Oh wow.
And they had a purple Lexus, like when Lexus started coming out
Right.
with cars. And I just thought that I've always remembered that because you know, he's a
That's
biggest thing ever.
I'm sorry to hear about your loss, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, it's horribly tough. But yeah, it was just funny. I was born in 83, so this is probably 85, 86 or something in there. And,
Right.
you know, the purple Lexus. I just remember that story.
Yeah, he had a purple house.
No way.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. His dad, Prince, gave his dad the purple house, and then once his dad died, he tore the house down.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Nate, any questions that you want to ask?
I was wondering, which Miles box sets did you work on?
I did the Bitches Brew 40th anniversary one, which is a big one.
Wow, yeah.
That was around the same time I did the Jane's Addiction Cabinet of Curiosities, which I got my one and only Grammy nomination for so far.
Oh, okay.
Then I did the Blue Note one more recently.
Okay.
Also did some 10 inches. I did the Bitches Brew Live.
Oh, okay.
I did the Legacy edition. It was like all the Bitches Brew stuff, and then the Blue Note one. Yeah, it's like I really want to. I guess now is going to be it is the time for the 50th
Oh,
anniversary.
right. Yeah,
now.
69, I think.
Yeah. So I got to call up Sony and see what they're doing for that.
Are there any sort of deep cut Miles albums that you want to share that maybe some of us haven't heard of that would be ones to check out?
I mean, of course, like Sketches of Spain, which
Sure,
I don't know
sure.
if that's deep cut, but to me is like, you know, so incredible. Feed the Kilimanjaro.
Oh, okay.
That's one of my favorites. Then On the Corner. I mean,
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna mention that. I love
On the Corner is like one of the ones I live. There's a couple Miles records that I've had to buy, and then it was cool when I did the Bitches Brew one, because then I finally had like a remastered vinyl that I had actually designed, so I had multiple copies of.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But there's a few records that I like destroyed coming
Just
up,
playing them
like
too
On the
much.
Corner. Yeah, I just played them too much, and my needles on my turntables weren't good enough. You know, On the Corner is definitely one of those. You know, yeah, I think those are the ones. Yeah,
That era was just so great.
the Electric Miles thing
Yeah,
is just like,
it's just
you know, it's
beautiful.
like Dylan going electric. It's like shocking. You know, it's just like, wait,
And
how
he
did
just
this?
owned it, you know?
And that's like, you know, well, actually, you talk about Bird Revelation. That's like, you know, the moment where Charlie Parker realized he didn't have to like follow suit and play jazz like he had been taught, that he could do his own thing. That's what the Bird Revelation means.
Oh.
And so Miles had that, you know, like Dylan had that. Like, that's why the greatest artist, Prince, you know, going, like, think of Prince going from Purple Rain, right? A bunch of it was cut in here, to Around the World in a Day, which is like literally going like 180. Like, he had the opportunity to come out with another record who would sound exactly like Purple Rain, which we know many artists have done. Like, all right, this is working. The label wants another one. Just keep doing the same pop, like whatever it is, we want more of it.
Right.
And the guy goes into a psychedelic trip, like album with opening with flutes, and, you know, didn't give a shit. Like, he just wanted to do his record. So at the time, Around the World in a Day was the fastest selling album in history, because it came right after Purple Rain. Then when people listened to it, they're like, whoa, this is not Purple Rain. This is so different. It, you know, kind of died down. But the fact that that's a true artist, like, you just put out what you feel is your music. Miles is a perfect example. Mingus is another great example. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of artists that have done that. And I guess that there's a reason, you know, they're legends, you know. But yeah, On the Corner, Miles is like really In a Silent Way. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
I got chills.
That whole
again.
era.
Chills all day in here. Yeah, In a Silent Way is.
Just
What would
beautiful stuff.
What would you tell aspiring photographers, videographers, film students to start off as? filming bands they like in small clubs.
Well, you start off with what makes you move, like whatever moves you, whatever you're passionate about.
Follow the passion, not the paycheck.
For sure, yeah. I mean, nobody ever succeeds by following a paycheck. Later on in life, you can have your, if you're an artist especially, but I think, it's foolish to think that you can just start off making money. It just doesn't work that way. But you can make your brand known, like, by having a look. Like, don't look at other people, like what I started seeing was kind of a compliment to me. A lot of people started sending me their pictures, especially when I was on the road with Lenny, and be like, this is my work. Like, I'm a big fan of yours. And they would literally try to make it look exactly like what I was doing, or pushing the contrast like crazy, or the colors, and I was like, that's super cool. But, I'm doing this, whoever else is doing what they're doing, like, just come up with your own individual look, And the truth is, sometimes people are just not meant for that. Like, there's people who want to do it, but like, I can't decide to be a violinist because I can try, but I know I'm not going to be a great violinist. You also have to be realistic with what, your true talent is. Like, you have to go by what you're talented at, not just by what you want.
And try different things. Look at you're in New York filming for fashion, and then all of a sudden you're managing bands. Then you're working on the Blaxploitation book with Quentin. I mean, you can just try different things. They're all kind of associated but different, and something's gonna hit.
Like Bootsy said, you can't fake the funk. You just have, you really do have to follow your instinct and follow your passion, and don't cut corners. Because that never really never works. And learn to be, like, milk the shit out of your talent. Like, just do whatever you can to get out there. It's not, it's not gonna just happen. And I think for sure I'm an example of that. But I mean, look at Questlove, right? I was in here with him too not too long ago. But it's like a guy like Questlove, like, who's writing, like, he just put out his 5th book. Like, it's like amazing. Like, what I mean? He's in the Roots, but he's done the TV show, Fallon, but he's doing this, and he's curating. He's got his radio station. I mean, it's like, it's insane. He's doing all this social, I mean, and I don't think at some point somebody tapped Questlove on the shoulder and be like, here's the key to success. The guy completely made himself as well. Like, there's just a lot of examples of that. And, like the hardest working man in show business. Sorry, I've gotten that a lot. I think of Questlove when I think of that term, since James Brown is no longer here. But, you can't be lazy. That's the biggest lesson. Like, a lot of people want it, but they don't want to really work for it. That's the problem with this generation and social media and seeing a world that you think is the real world, and it's not, because it's all bullshit. It's all made up and curated, and, I do it myself. Somebody takes a picture of me for something and I see it. I'm like, oh, no, I got to do the selfie thing because I look better in the selfie. It's like we're all guilty of it. And it's like, it's not the real world. It's whatever you angle the world to be. And so a lot of people see these influencers and they're like, I want to do this and I want to be like this person and I want to look like Kylie Jenner and I want to, but it's like Kylie Jenner doesn't look like Kylie Jenner. That's fabricated. That's great. I mean, good for her. She's a billionaire already, but that's not the real world. Look at a picture of Kylie in high school. That's the real world, So just like, I think we just have to be realistic that it's much harder now because there's a lot in the way, and everybody's hooked, to their phones. They can't put the phone down. It's like, there's a lot more car accidents since the phones. It's all the same. Phones are killing us, and they're making us lazy and dumb. And, so I think by putting the phone down and, the video games down and all those things and just go out there. And, I just did it was amazing. Dave had me do a master class at his high school in D.C. a couple weeks ago at Duke Ellington, where he graduated from. And that was one of the main things. I was like, looking at kids, I was like, guys, put your phone down. Like, there were kids in the master class, like in the class, on their phones. I was like, first of all, the first lesson is put the phone down and pay attention, And then we got into this great conversation. I told literally 100 kids in the class, I'm like, take my email, any question you have, anything I can do to review your portfolios, whatever. And I mean it. Like, you know, I'm not the be all end all. I'm not the best at what I do, but I can give feedback if they want my feedback, and if they want, you know, to know if they want help on something, I'm happy to help. I'll also be honest, which can be hard sometimes. But, you know, the main thing is that people don't really like go after it anymore because they're too busy doing whatever, you know, they're doing on their phones or checking Instagram or
also mimicking the greats is not, you know, unique always wins me over when
Yeah.
I see something different. Everyone's, you know, it comes a lot. You see it a lot in music. They're trying to create a sound that somebody they like or their influence, you know, whether it's taking a picture or, you know, you've learned methods or techniques in
Yeah.
acting or musicianship, but do you, because
Yeah,
there's
and it's-
already a Kylie Jenner, there's already a Lenny
Right.
Kravitz, there's always,
yeah.
you know, you're gonna.
And it's okay to be, you know, it's like it's an old cliche, but it's really okay to fail. Like, I've failed at things. Like, you know, it's okay to not always know what's right, and it's okay to not always be the best at something, but keep showing up, keep coming back. And a lot of these young photographers I talk to, you know, they're asking me, what are the settings on your camera? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? The camera, like, for me, I'm now privileged to be a Leica ambassador, and I've worked my way into that as well. But it's like, it doesn't matter what the camera is. Like, if this is what you have, buy like a throwaway camera and just take pictures. Like, at some point, you'll be able to afford to buy the best camera for you, you know. But it's like, when you're starting out, don't think like, I can't do it because I don't have the best camera. It's like a guitar player saying, I don't have a 69 Les Paul, so I can't record my album. No, record your album with your reissue or whatever Epiphone. Doesn't matter, because it's what you're playing, you know. And people get really stuck on that now. I think people get, you know, really discouraged if they don't have the opportunity to record or to shoot with the best tools, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, look at like turn of the century photography, and look at like the best photographers who were shooting on whatever cameras were, you know, they had.
Oh yeah.
Nobody was like, oh yeah, that could have been better if they had a Leica M3, or, you know. And yes, of course, the image is going to look way better on a Leica M3, but this image is still going to look great on the other thing you shot with, you know. And then you work up your way. Like, that's another thing, I collect Leicas, you know. It's like a disease, but I'm slowing down a little bit because I got miles in college. But,
break
you know,
ground, do things that aren't, you know,
yeah,
do things that people aren't doing. I think that's just, you know, that's what catches the eye too. Like, wait a minute, this isn't right. And that's what makes it right, that it's not right.
yeah, what's right is what you know is right. You know, if you have good instincts, then you know what's right, you know. And sometimes I was just like at the Comedy Store the other day, I'm like telling Julian, like, oh, you know, I didn't get a picture with DiCaprio and blah, blah, blah. And every time I'm, you know, because sometimes it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes you got to know instinctively, I'm not taking this picture right now. Like, you know, I regretted one like with Dave and Nipsey Hussle. Like, you know, like I was there with them, we were hanging out, you know, and I was like, it doesn't feel. Jay-Z was there. I'm like, right now I don't want to take my camera out. And then he passed like a few weeks later. I'm like, man, I wish I'd taken that photo for Dave to have. But you know what? It just wasn't meant to be. Like, you have to follow your instincts, and nobody wants like the annoying guy who's always taking pictures. Like, and my thing with like Jay-Z is there. I don't want him to think every time he sees me, I'm going to be taking pictures, you know? And that's also important, knowing the boundaries, you know, setting boundaries for yourself.
Real quick,
You've said real quick for about an hour and a half. Oh, go ahead.
Dave Grohl, I saw him. Gary Clark was opening up for the Foo Fighters. I saw him. Dave's a legend in my mind, and I didn't bug him. But then I saw him again on my birthday at the Fonda, where Dave showed up for Gary Clark's show. And not only did he take a picture with me, he partied with me till 3 a.m. and then jumped on the hood of my girlfriend's car and went, "Ah!"
That's funny.
It's
He's
like,
a really nice guy too, Grohl.
Timing is everything.
One of my oldest friends is Rami Jaffee, who plays, you know, keys in the Foo Fighters. He used to be in the Wallflowers. It's like the first guy I met when I moved in '87.
That's a great documentary the Foo Fighters have on Netflix.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was such a revolving band for the beginning years.
Yeah.
And Mathieu Bitton, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I guess we went, let's see, 2.5 hours?
This is part 1.
Okay.
We'll be back next Sunday.
Exactly.
Just kidding.
Do it every Sunday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.